All right, let's get this meeting of Community Infrastructure Services started. We have 3 consent items. Does someone want to move those? Moved by Councillor Johnston. Any questions? Councillor Gazzola?
Yeah, I just would like to take a minute to have staff. There's been a lot of work done, I'm sure, in preparing this document. I tried to single out what the highlights, what is it telling us. I wonder if staff could just take a moment to summarize what's in the report.
Sorry, is that number 3?
I'm sorry, yeah, on the growth management.
Okay, we need to take that out of consent in order to discuss it. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. Brandon?
Sure, through the chair, maybe we'll have Sarah help provide the highlights. You're looking for maybe the top 3, 4 things of the awesome year we've had for growth and development in Kitchener, I'm assuming.
Thank you, Brandon. I'd refer you to page 2 of your package. That kind of give a good sense of some of the highlights that I'll go through. In terms of building permits we've received this year, we've received a healthy amount, about 1,300, which is on par with what we've normally receive, and we're already surpassed that in what we've received this year. So that's a good indication of the growth we've been receiving. In terms of our densities in our urban growth center, which is our downtown, it's remained steady, but we're expecting that we'll see this spike in the next few years because of all the applications that we have in process. So our densities are looking good in the downtown, and they're meeting provincial, regional, and also city targets that we have, so that's really good. We're seeing a variety of housing types in terms of the permits that we're getting, which we like to see. We're also meeting and exceeding our targets in terms of intensification, what we refer to our built-up area. So we're exceeding those targets, and that's looking great as well. So overall, we're really encouraged by what we've seen this year, and we're meeting our targets, and things are looking really good, and we're in good shape.
Okay, just a couple of follow-ups. The first thing that I saw was that there was the residential dwellings went down from last year, and it's lower than our 5, 10, 15-year average. Did I hear you say that for 2019 that has come back?
Sure, through the chair, actually, we were just looking at the numbers the other day. Through the first 9 months of the year, we're actually up to our top 5 of all time. There's a bit of the staggering of the downtown permits, the way that they are coming into the numbers as to the construction goes, but so far in 2019, we're almost double all of last year already, and we still have a couple months to go, so it could be a banner year by the end of the year. And that's actually pretty consistent for townhouses, singles. We have a lot of duplex or additional units being built right now, and especially the apartment buildings. They're all up.
Okay, my final question, there's an awful lot of relevant and important information in this report. I'm sure a considerable amount of work is spent in preparing it. Can you tell me how you see it being used? Or is it something that's prepared, a lot of work, and then it's put on the shelf? Can you just give me some indication of how it's valued?
Sure, through the chair, we have an obligation to provide an annual report to the region because we're the delegated approval authority for subdivisions and some other developments within the city. So every year this report is our requirement or obligations under that between the region and the city. So that's one, how it's used. The other part, how it's used, is that as part of our overall growth management program. We've been doing this for almost 10 years now. It helps us track and have an understanding of, one, our overall land supply, both within our built-up area, the areas we want to grow with our transit nodes and corridors, but also our greenfield supply. It's going to become quite important in the next year or two because the region is about to undertake another study of all of the land supply the targets and the direction that we're going for our next growth planning horizon over the next 20 years, 25 years or so. And so having the baseline and the tracking of this over the last 10 years plus is going to be valuable background information towards the trends and where Kitchener might be going in the future as it relates to how we're establishing and hitting our targets and how we're growing as a city.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chapman on this one?
Yes. Just a couple questions. Bill 66 reduces the job and population density ratio per hectare to 40. Does that in any way modify the city's approach to that population density ratio moving forward?
Through the chair, I'm not familiar with the 40 target. Are you referring to residents and jobs per hectare in a certain location, like our greenfield areas?
Well, I'm not sure. I think the Bill 66, I'm not sure, actually. I was hoping you would just clarify where that fits into this growth report that we're getting here.
Sure, through the chair, the Kitchener's always been well positioned to achieve any numerical targets that have been provided through the province or that are updated through the region as it relates to our region. A lot of the provincial targets are measured on a region-wide basis. And sometimes they are differentiated between the urban municipalities of Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge versus the townships. And you've got densities, targets for greenfield areas, for the downtown area, and then you have overall residential development split between the built-up area and the greenfield area. Kitchener is one of the interesting municipalities in the Greater Golden Horseshoe where we have both greenfield opportunities and intensification, and we've been really focusing on the intensification over the last many years. We're well positioned to achieve all the targets, including the target perhaps that you're speaking of about greenfield density. We haven't reported on it specifically with specific numbers in the report, although in the end, in the implementation section, there's some commentary about how we're performing in the greenfield. Kitchener's easily achieving that target, if not higher. We have a variety of townhouses, stacked townhouses, but we're getting more mixed-use developments. Those help the numbers. The other quick little thing, too, is we don't want to just do planning by numbers. So the targets is one thing, and we do want to have these documents to illustrate it, but when we're building our communities, even in the greenfield area, we're still trying to plan for things that are transit supportive, walkable. They're achieving a lot of the objectives that we have.
Okay. My other question has to do with the 2006 growth plan and the Greater Golden Horseshoe growth plan. Where does the 2017 Places to Grow growth plan fit into this analysis?
Sure. So through the chair, the growth plan continues to be updated. There's updates that the previous outgoing provincial government made, and then there are updates that the new provincial government has made. And they have changed some of the numbers and some of the approach about it. Primarily the way that it gets borne out is through the next level. So the province has updated those plans. There's now obligation of what I mentioned, the region, to update their plans. So they're going to take these updated growth plan targets and numbers, and they're going through the process over the next year of assessing what does that mean for the region of Waterloo. What could happen in Kitchener, what could happen in Cambridge, what could happen in Woolwich, Wellesley, etc. And then once that process is done, and that will establish the numbers that we would have to then bring into our official plan. So conceivably, this information, and we're well aware that this monitoring report that we provide on this information, it is assessing it and looking at it. No matter what the targets are going to be, it's kind of assessing it based on the previous ones. It's going to have to evolve and be updated after that time. So the province has changed, next is the region to update, then the city, we're going to have to update our plan to reflect those targets, and we'll see what the monitoring program is at that point.
And what's that turnover time? Like, this is a 2017 report, right? And it still hasn't gone through the regional process, and hence the city?
So the region has a specific amount of time under the provincial growth plan as to when they have to update their official plan to implement those changes. And then the city has a certain time to update after that. If we want to get into some of the specifics, I can, but essentially all the regions within the Greater Golden Horseshoe have to have their plans updated by 2022, and then the local municipalities have 1 year to update their plans after that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Johnston?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair. There's so much good information in here, and something I know that I'm finding with my residents is that people don't necessarily know about the direction that our city's going in terms of intensification, especially in building up of neighborhoods that are already well established. And I would love to see us be able to get this information out more to our public so that they would be aware, a lot more aware of the direction that we're going in terms of intensification, the reasons behind it, the whole hold the line strategy, etc. And I think it wouldn't come as much of a surprise then whenever things are getting redeveloped in neighborhoods. So my question would more be around how do we be more proactive about this information and getting it out to the public? I know that we work really hard at that, and maybe people don't think of it as being really exciting, but I think it's something that's so important, and it only seems to hit people whenever it's happening in their neighborhood.
Yeah, through the chair, that's a really good point. For those that would be familiar with the work that was done when we created the growth management strategy back in 2009, one of the action items was about communications and about engaging with the public about how our community is evolving and changing, and the types and locations of growth are changing. There was a 3-phase implementation plan for that, and we worked with our communication staff on that. There was a lot of work done at the time. We had videos, we had a vignette, we had all these things online, in person, other things. When we got to kind of the 3rd phase of it, then it kind of became the issues that we ended up dealing with and creating the residential intensification and established neighborhood study was really, in my opinion, the evolution of that 3rd phase of needing to engage with people about how this intensification is happening in our neighborhoods. However, it has been many years since we've taken a stab at trying to bring this information out. So I think we had intended to update our program, but then and get back to the community about that. However, now all the provincial and regional stuff is all changing. So if we can find a way to do it within the upcoming framework, maybe that's something we can dialogue about through our growth management program and with council over the next year or two.
Mr. Reedman would like to add something?
Through the chair, so council may recall part of the development services review, the 2 main projects that were initiated were site plan and public engagement. So this is some of the discussion we're having around public engagement. How do we better engage with the community around development related projects? So this is something we're looking at through that process.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all the questions that we have with respect to the consent items. It's been moved. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, we are going to continue moving on with the agenda, and we're going to go to number 4, the new urban design manual. And Adam's going to be giving us a presentation.
All right, thank you. So first, I would just like to thank everybody for being here and for giving us the opportunity to bring the new Urban Design Manual Part A to committee this afternoon. So what does the Urban Design Manual do? The Urban Design Manual sets expectations. It creates a benchmark for community, site, and building design for land developers, city staff, and the community. The Urban Design Manual applies primarily to private site development, guiding built form, compatibility, site design elements, and other things. It also applies to the design of the public realm, green areas, and city-led capital projects to ensure that all of Kitchener is thoughtfully and comprehensively designed for the enjoyment of all. The manual seeks to provide both certainty and flexibility, which is a challenging thing. Design is complex, it's multidisciplinary, and it's iterative. There are many good design objectives that must respond to site-specific constraints and opportunities, and therefore do not fit within the framework of a zoning bylaw, for example. The new Urban Design Manual provides certainty by plainly stating the city's objectives, and flexibility by encouraging a collaborative process to determine how best to achieve those directives. And finally, the Urban Design Manual is an important implementation tool. For many major recently adopted policy planning documents, including the new official plan, the parts plans, so planning around rapid transit stations, stage 1 of the new zoning bylaw, which is the Crosby project, and the REN study, or the residential and infill in established neighborhood study. How does the Urban Design Manual work? It has 3 parts. Part A is what's being presented here today for approval. It contains guidelines for various land uses and built forms, focusing on inclusive design, sustainability, outdoor comfort and open space design, compatibility, cultural and natural heritage, built form massing and transitional elements, and site functional elements. Part B contains specific design plans, such as streetscape plans for specific streets, neighborhood plans, and master plans. And Part C contains design standards, or the more technical design expectations for site elements. This includes things like outdoor lighting, surface parking, landscaping, etc. It will be updated in the near future. Part A is generally used by the industry to prepare an urban design report, which is reviewed by urban design staff as part of a site plan submission process. Part C is used by industry and staff to review and approve detailed drawings prior to full site plan approval, and Part B houses plans that would be too detailed or location-specific to fit within Part A. So how has the manual changed over time? Kitchener's first Urban Design Manual was approved 20 years ago, and that made Kitchener among the first to have a dedicated design manual and established us as a leader in design among Ontario municipalities. It was updated in 2010, bringing more progressive expectations for subdivision or new neighborhood design, CEPTED, which is crime prevention through environmental design, and drive-through facilities. But as we all know, dramatic change has occurred in Kitchener, not just over the last 20 or even 10 years, but ongoing substantial change that has been catalyzed just in the last few years. The new manual preserves much of what made the 2010 manual such an effective tool for subdivision design, but provides a necessary and more sophisticated set of expectations for intensification areas, urban infill, and transit-oriented development as well. And that's to ensure that Kitchener remains a design leader as it grows up rather than out. A good example are the tall building guidelines, which were approved in December of 2017. They have since been used to successfully guide tower development to limit shadow and wind impacts, to protect for future development on adjacent sites, and to ensure that Kitchener grows responsibly and equitably. The new manual brings a similar philosophy to other land uses and built forms throughout the city. The new Urban Design Manual introduces or provides an increased focus on topics such as inclusive design. So this is the splash circle at the boardwalk. Inclusive design includes important objectives and principles for things like public safety, universal and equitable accessibility, affordability, age and family-friendly design, social infrastructure, and arts and culture. Smart city design is another thing that we're emphasizing more. This photo is from the Kitchener Innovation Lab over at the Tannery. It shows an augmented reality 3D model of City Hall. So for those who've never used augmented reality before, you download an app to your smart device, and it lets you view real-time 3D models as if they were in the room with you. This technology has a lot of potential for use in public engagement, and we're working with the Innovation Lab on this and other initiatives that will help the implementation of the Urban Design Manual over time. Smart city design means making the most of Kitchener's position as a global leader in innovation, to explore opportunities to make design more flexible, legible, and accessible to the public, industry, and staff, and to find improvements and efficiencies in any number of processes. And sustainability. This is 50 Kent, winner of the 2016 Kitchener Great Places Award for Sustainable Design. The new Urban Design Manual provides a significant focus on sustainability, including health and well-being, design for climate change, both mitigation and adaptation, and design for birds and wildlife. With Kitchener City Council unanimously declaring a climate emergency in June of this year, a greater focus on sustainable design is urgently needed. The manual does, however, provide the industry with flexibility to ensure that our long-term sustainability objectives can be achieved fairly and adaptively. And finally, intensification and compatibility. The new Urban Design Manual acts as a substantially greater resource for development within intensification areas, emphasizing compatibility and limiting undesirable impacts. With the launch of the ION and the surge of development in the downtown and within station areas, it is critical that we have a manual that can address complex, challenging infill development in a sophisticated, adaptable, and scalable way. All of this helps to create a city for everyone. And building a city for everyone means that we need to create an urban design manual for everyone. This meant extensive industry and stakeholder consultation, which included 15 industry interviews and 11 meetings with citizen boards and committees of council, resulting in over 300 written comments. But it also meant extensive and unique public engagement. Public engagement on an urban design manual is not necessarily common practice, but we wanted to create a manual that the public could use, that reflected their priorities and understood their concerns. Early in the process, we held 6 different coffee shop chats around the city, and this photo is of one of them, to hear from as many different people from as many different wards as we possibly could. Around the same time, we created an online survey through Engage Kitchener to solicit additional feedback. We also set up shop for the day at 44 Gaukel for Doors Open Waterloo Region, which let us speak with an expanded audience of people who are particularly engaged with built form and urban issues. We held a downtown design talk for residents of the downtown. And we held 6 design charrettes for central neighborhoods. Upon the completion of the neighborhood planning review process, the results of these charrettes will be incorporated into the Urban Design Manual to provide community-led guidelines specific to each neighborhood. And we have also been fortunate enough to have the opportunity to present at numerous professional conferences over the past year, promoting design in Kitchener, building our reputation, and speaking with other design professionals. Here we are presenting at the Ontario Association of Architects Conference in Quebec City. That was in May, if I remember that correctly. We have also presented at the Ontario Professional Planners Institute Conference in Sudbury, which was in October of last year, and we held a webinar for the Canadian Institute of Planners as part of World Town Planning Day. So how is the manual structured? Because we have reorganized the content from the previous version of the manual. The new manual offers enhanced organization and usability. Section 1 is the citywide design section, which establishes the broader vision and objectives for the city as a whole. It contains guidelines that can be applied to all land uses and built forms, and that helps to limit duplication of certain objectives throughout the other sections of the manual. From there, 12 additional sections address a specific land use or built form. The intention is to simplify development review because in concert with the citywide section, any given development should only have to address 2 other sections, 1 land use and 1 built form. So for example, a 6-story proposal in a city node would look to the mid-rise buildings and the nodes and corridors sections when producing an urban design report. This sort of just streamlines things for the development industry. And now on to coordination with some other projects. As you know, the Complete Streets project and the Development Manual update will both be appearing before committee later this year. So seen here is a theoretical cross-section through a busy urban street. The Urban Design Manual focuses on the built form and site design of the private development along the street, but also works to address the streetscape, pedestrian experience, and other factors, to tie all the design elements together and create a consistent, comprehensive, and well-designed public realm, ensuring that our urban environment is more than just the sum of its parts. The Complete Streets guidelines provide street design standards for new and reconstructed streets with guidance on all forms of transportation. And so their realm is sort of within this green hatched area. And finally, the Development Manual provides technical standards and guidance for subdivisions, site plans, and streets for all associated infrastructure and utilities, stormwater management, lock grading, and more. So a lot of what the manual deals with is sort of underground utilities. Combined, all 3 projects would look something like this. Each project has its own area of focus and expertise, and where elements overlap, we need to coordinate to ensure the best possible outcome that addresses all combined priorities. For example, a site plan for a private development would rely heavily on the Urban Design Manual for guidance and would have to meet the standards of the Development Manual as well. A road reconstruction would heavily rely on the Complete Streets guidelines and the Development Manual, and the Urban Design Manual would play a supporting role. So next steps. To be effective, the new Urban Design Manual must be thoughtfully implemented. We must also monitor that progress and ensure that it's applied equitably and to inform what updates may need to be made over the life of the manual. After approval of the manual, staff will work to develop an implementation and monitoring approach that balances these objectives with a monitoring report provided to Council biannually beginning in 2021. This photo is from a staff workshop on tall building design, and this is the kind of thing we intend to carry forward. Part C of the manual, the technical design standards, will also need to be updated to reflect the ongoing evolution of urban design in Kitchener. We still need to develop the work plan and resourcing for this project. With this new manual, thoughtful implementation and monitoring, and a continued commitment to collaboration and creativity, Kitchener can continue to be one of the best designed mid-sized cities in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We're going to move to the delegation first. We have one delegation, and that's Andrea Sinclair from MHBC Planning. Welcome, Andrea.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm a planner and associate with MHBC Planning, and I'm here today on behalf of the owners of Bingamons. We're here in support of the city's new urban design manual as it relates to the Bingamons property. And we just wanted to thank staff for the positive consultation process that they led with ourselves and Bingamons in preparing some area-specific guidelines that recognize the uniqueness of Bingamons within the broader Bingaman Center Drive and Shirley Avenue employment area. Specifically, we just wanted to thank Adam Clark, Dana Edwards, and Lenore Ross, who took the time to sit down with our group and work through guidelines that work on behalf of the city and for our client. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much for coming in. Does anyone have any questions for the delegation? No, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all the delegations that we had registered. So we'll turn to questions now, questions of staff. First is Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll say this again in my comments in the end, but just want to again thank Dana and Adam. You've done phenomenal work leading up to this stage. A lot of hours have gone in, and I appreciate that, you know, your objective has been very comprehensive report, something that can meet the test of time. While we are currently in the process of Crosby for residential side, how do you see this complementing that review, or would this something that need to be amended, what comes out of any changes through Crosby?
So through the chair, we work closely with the Crosby team and the residential zoning team as well. We've attempted to certainly flag any places where there could be potential upcoming conflict in the future. I think we've controlled for that pretty well, certainly through ongoing conversations with that team and making sure that we're all aligned as we lead up. So if something sort of dramatic did happen during the residential zoning process, then we would possibly have to update the manual to reflect those changes, but we don't anticipate that.
Okay, that's good to hear. And I appreciate the last bit of your presentation. You said that, you know, building expectation as we become a big city. And I think as much as some may not like it, that is going to be the end evolution of our region here, that we will be one day a big city. So having the right design is important. Right now we're grappling with two things. One, growing up, while at the same time keeping residential ownership or the prospect of having ownership affordable and within reach of most of our residents. So how do we tread that balance of setting a high expectation on the design from the development community while at the same time ensuring that development meets the pro forma of units that could be affordable or attainable if someone wants to build to that category?
Through the chair, we were obviously very cognizant of the importance of affordable housing throughout the creation of this document. It's something that informed a lot of the decision making along the way. And while the manual doesn't directly create or require affordable housing, we wanted to make sure that nothing that we did would frustrate the ability to get affordable housing into the future. And so in that way, you'll see that this manual is a little bit different from other cities in that it doesn't ask for specific decorative elements or certain material palettes. Because to us, great design isn't about cost, it's about making the most of whatever is occurring.
So as you're answering that, I just want to, we focus on the specific of where I think the challenge could be. It's not necessarily just the materials, and I think there probably is flexibility for materials. The challenge may end up being, and I think this is something that we don't focus enough on the site design, especially when you're dealing with affordable housing. Is there flexibility there as well?
Through the chair, yes. So that's the idea is that through the site design, we have a much more comprehensive understanding of the way that things are being designed and the product that's on offer. And so the point I was making about materials is that we're not sort of just narrowly focused on a certain kind of aesthetic. What we want to do is encourage great collaboration and great design among all parties so that when an affordable housing project comes in, we're not here making comments and recommendations that sort of frustrate their ability to provide that, but we're working with that product to create the best possible design on the site.
Okay, and just to be able to better collaborate or partner with the development community, I think this is a comment that I had made to you when we both met, or the three of us had met, could we set the bar high while at the same time giving certain incentives? Does that achieve that? If a developer says, okay, you know what, I'll build to the best of standard as expectation that you guys want, but again, I want some relief on density or through the site plan process. Is there an avenue to achieve that?
Through the chair, there's certainly through sort of official plan and zoning bylaw amendments, there's the ability to do that. Within the manual itself, what we sort of build in is a flexibility to understand so that on a site-by-site basis, we're not just trying to apply the same 5 or 6 things over and over again. We're looking at the context in order to determine actually the best way to do development. And so it creates more collaboration because we're not just picking from a list.
Okay, that's good to hear.
Just 1 second. Mr. Reedman would like to add something.
Through the chair, so I would like to expand a little bit further through the development review as well. Site plan is the process, and we heard loud and clear from our partners that collaboration is something they wanted to see. So we're working through our site plan process to see how we can be more collaborative and work better together through development to achieve objectives that we'd like to see and what the development industry would like to see.
Very glad to hear. I just had one quick question. Can I? Mm-hmm. The last bit was, and I think I had mentioned this in our meeting, was the look back reflection. I think I heard through the presentation that year 1 there would be a review and then something brought back. Did I hear correctly, or?
Through the chair, our intention is to sort of go away after approval and develop the implementation and monitoring plan to deliver back to council in 2021, just because with a new manual, it takes some time to implement on new site plan developments. Also, we want to align it with the Kitchener Great Places Award so we can sort of do a design thing to council all at once and do it that way. But yeah, that's sort of the next step for us, is to create that plan.
So that's already established, that there will be a way to come back and go back to the development community as well, ensuring that the changes that we made are making sense in the real world also.
For sure.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councillor Chapman?
Yeah. Thank you, Adam and Dana, for the work you put into it. In fact, I'm surprised to see you here today, Dana. Welcome back. So my questions are, first of all, I'll say that when I go through this manual, to me it depicts the ideal city, which for me creates a bit of a problem, because I don't think we're actually going to create the ideal city by producing a manual of this sort, because unless we have a way to implement all of these guidelines, it's not going to do that for us. So one of my questions would be, as we go through, as we look at this manual, how many of the clauses and or sections of the manual do you actually expect to be fulfilled at each building site? Like, what would your expectations be?
Through the chair, our expectation, because these are guidelines, and the things that are in the guidelines are sort of necessarily guidelines because they can't be applied through a zoning bylaw, for example, because there's too much variance on an individual site. Our expectation is that all of the guidelines are addressed. You may have noticed that the language is actually much more directive than it is in other design manuals. We say provide or require or other things, and so, but they are still guidelines. And so our intention is that through the site plan submission process, everything is considered. Where things cannot be done as written, we'd like to see a justification for that and an approach that achieves the objective that we're trying to get at. So that's where the flexibility sort of comes in, is that it's hard to say that we will directly implement every guideline per the letter of the law. If we were able to do that, it would be in a zoning bylaw. But because we have to allow for a lot of flexibility to respond to individual opportunities and constraints, sometimes it lets us do more, sometimes it actually makes us do a little bit less. But that's part of the collaboration that we're trying to build, is that we get everybody, industry, public, and staff all excited about what's happening through an aspirational document such as this, and that over time we actually implement more and more and more.
Okay. as I again go through this, there are different sections or clauses that I see that I say, well, why couldn't this be a bylaw? Like how, and maybe I need more guidance on this. How can I, if I want to pick out some sections and I want to say, I'd like to see this be a bylaw because I think it is applicable across the board, how would one go about that process?
Through the chair, that is something that we're hoping that the implementation process reveals to us, which is whether it's from recommendations from council or the industry or public, we can actually identify the guidelines that are achievable, say, 95% of the time, and that we can put those into a future zoning bylaw update if that's determined to be the correct way to go from the zoning team, from the rest of the planning division, and from council's direction.
Okay, so you're saying that there is potential to do that. Okay, and can I just ask for a minor amendment? On page 1, under the section inclusivity, if you could add at the end, somewhere at the end of the first paragraph, where you list all the different cultural identity and identities and age groups, etc. If you could add, and all socioeconomic statuses or statuses. On page 1. Citywide. Oh, yeah, citywide, page 1. Under inclusivity, the end of the first paragraph.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's it for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Up next is Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. I think this manual is very important, and I am very excited to see it here today. It's very beautifully laid out and designed that I think is reflective of the level of design you're looking for in the citywide, as you mentioned in the report. I just want to know, can you tell us about how this document will continue to be a living document when it comes to neighborhood-specific guidelines? We did do the charrettes, as you mentioned, and will they just be added as they are developed based on that feedback?
So through the chair, the central neighborhood-specific guidelines, which were developed through the charrette process and are ongoing, will be added into the manual upon the approval of those secondary plans in the future when those come in front of council. So our idea is just that they will be, there's a placeholder here currently for those. Once they've gone through a little bit more public consultation and other things that the secondary plan process is doing, then they'll just sub right in when that's done.
Mm-hmm. And then the implementation and monitoring report that, you haven't yet developed your plan of how you're going to implement that. What I want to understand is, are you bringing that back to council to share with us an update of the plan before 2021? And when approximately can we expect that?
I don't know. Can management weigh in on that for me?
Go ahead, Brendan.
Through the chair, the idea is to bring back essentially a state of urban design and Kitchener report in 2021 that would include how things are going with implementation. And there can be some discussion at that time with council if there's changes that we think we need to look at for the manual or its implementation. In terms of the actual implementation plan itself, it's a little bit more on the staff side because it involves how the different sections and divisions work together. It's also, the primary audience of this is the planners and the urban designers from the city. So the intent isn't to have all of that in a quote-unquote implementation plan that would come to council. It's a little bit more of an internal-facing discussions and conversations and actions we need to take.
Okay, so just so I'm understanding correctly, are you saying that the monitoring report that we'll receive in 2 years will tell us how all the ins and outs and positives and minuses about how the whole darn manual is being implemented, or?
Yes.
Okay, great. Those are all my questions for now. I'll have comments later.
Councillor Schneider?
Thank you, Chair Galloway Seelock. Thank you for this, the outcome of this. I know there was so much work that went into this from from so many different inputs. And when we're talking about these being guidelines, so we can't have them as hard and fast rules, but the development industry was part of the inputting on this. And how would you describe their buy-in to these guidelines?
Through the chair, it's been quite collaborative, positive process, I would characterize it as. The industry sort of understood better what we were trying to achieve once we were able to sit down with them one-on-one. Especially, there was a little bit of hesitancy around the use of more directive language relative to other manuals that the industry might be used to that say things like encourage or consider. But once we made clear and actually wrote in the upfront part of the manual that the expectation was provide this, and if you can't, then let us know what your strategy is to achieve the objective. The industry sort of, I think, understands that very well. We've been working with them throughout the process, trying to build that collaborative spirit that we all want to have eventually.
And this may be hard to answer, but I would imagine that the intention of this is to build great buildings and for the city, and I would take that the development industry would also like to do that. Would you see, let's say, one developer comes in, they follow the guidelines, they build a great building. Now there's a space down the road or next to it. Does that maybe encourage that developer to match or better that? I know that might be hard to answer, but maybe that's one of the intentions of this.
Through the chair, that is an experience that we've had reported to us from the industry, is that a development of a certain quality does encourage and reinforce the need for development of similar quality adjacent. So we've heard that directly from the industry, that we can sort of float all boats at the same time through this. And by being able to do that while remaining flexible and by not sort of adding a lot of cost, I think has been really important for everybody involved.
Okay, and just one final question. I know this is based on newer buildings, but what if there's an existing property and they want to expand, but they've got an earlier footprint and maybe some of these guidelines don't quite 100% match? Do we have the ability to invoke some grandfathering issues or work with them to have their property as uniform as possible?
Yes, through the chair. It's our intention to allow that kind of flexibility on sort of any site-specific constraint or opportunity. But where there is an existing phase, and for example, or a new addition is added, we would look to the Urban Design Manual to provide guidance on what's being built. But we would also be very careful about providing comments around compatibility, making sure the whole thing looks good in the overall, and allowing that project to sort of be the best that it can be with the conditions that it starts with.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ioannidis?
Thank you, Chair Galloway Seelock. The question I have is, I just wanted to touch base with the staff on this, and it's regard to a concern that I've been receiving for many, many years dealing with light pollution. And I just want to know what's in here in particular that is to dealing with that.
Through the chair, we do have numerous guidelines speaking to light pollution, certainly about maximum color temperature and other factors as well. It's also our intent to, during the update of Part C of the manual, to provide much more very specific standards about light pollution, even beyond what we have today. So while there is a lot in Part A that actually speaks to light pollution and wildlife design and things like that, the specific techniques or the standards will be in Part C in the future, but the two will work together.
Okay, so in other words, we will have sort of a standard in between those two projects? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for your patience with that issue. I know you guys have been dealing a lot with that, so I appreciate that.
I have just a couple questions. They're more getting into the nitty-gritty of some of it. It's with respect to the new development section on page number 8 with regards to traffic calming. And it talks about, I just got to get there first. Under the traffic calming, it has landscape medians as an option, which is a fine option. Who is responsible for maintaining those once they're built?
Through the chair, if the landscape median is in the middle of the right-of-way, then the maintenance cost would be on the city, as I understand it. Sorry, I shouldn't necessarily speak out of turn, but this is my best understanding of the thing. If it's a boulevard on the sort of on either side, I believe that the maintenance is left to the individual property owners there.
Okay, so I guess my other question was with regards to focal points and gateways. Again, who is responsible for maintaining those?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
The focal points and gateways into communities.
Can I get someone who's got a little more new neighborhood experience?
Go ahead. Sorry. Through the chair. The focal points and gateways, it'll be a matter of what is determined through either a plan of subdivision or a site plan. So if a piece of public art from a site plan perspective is placed on private property, then it would be the private property owner. If there's some form of arrangement that's made that maybe it's purchased by the developer, but it's on public property, then we would have to make an arrangement for what that would look like in terms of ongoing maintenance responsibilities.
So that is all determined through site plan. Who's responsible?
Site plan or a subdivision process.
Okay. I think it's important because we're having some issues with that right now. So I think it's important if we're asking developers to do these types of things, which aren't bad things to ask, how are they going to be maintained moving forward? And some of them have substantial cost to them. So I think the city has to be ready to take on some of that cost when we ask for these types of things. Brandon, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, sorry about that. Just to supplement a bit on the subdivision side of things, and I think I know the particular one that may be of issue or interest. There is a council policy about entry features, and it deals a little bit, and the manual does deal with a little bit of the direction about maintenance, and has in the past. There is the possibility that if there is an entrance feature on a corner of land that the city would then take ownership through the subdivision conditions, can deal with a one-time payment towards maintenance to a certain limit. I think that needs to be recalled when we're doing new subdivisions. The other part of it too is our practice has been, and we haven't had a lot of these lately, is with the subdivision report. When it comes for draft approval to council, we identify in the financial implications sections these type of things. Because we are trying to build that in and help out the operations and maintenance to know that, hey, in a couple of years, this thing's going to be built. We're going to have to maintain it one day to start to build that into future operating budgets.
That's good. It's good to hear. I knew it wasn't necessarily going to be written in stone in this document, but just wanted to make a point that if we're asking for things, we also have to be ready to maintain some of those as well. That's all the questions that I see. So I guess comments. There's a number of comments. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Galloway Seelock. First of all, I just want to thank the team for doing a phenomenal job. You guys are a great bunch, rising stars in our planning department. I feel what I really like and what I've noticed in here too is in particular with section 4 dealing with the central neighborhoods, and you added a couple pictures of some infill development that I'm very familiar with, and which is what I was hoping to see, and they're fabulous, and I'm glad that they're recognized, and I think these are great guidelines for the compatibility and the natural heritage and et cetera, and I'm glad that they're in here. So excellent job for that. But overall, I think this is a great guideline for our community for our design to strive for better. And as I mentioned in the past, for me, good design will always outwin all the negativity of whatever the development is. And if it's built well and looks well, won't be detrimental to any neighborhood. To me, it will totally enhance the neighborhood and raise the values of everyone in that area. So to me, this is a great document, and again, thank you very much.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you to Dana and Adam in particular for your hard work and dedication in getting this to where it is today. Thank you especially to Dana for coming in during your mat leave and showing your dedication to the work that you've done, and we'll look forward to seeing you back in action when no earlier than when you're supposed to, but yeah, after this. So I just want to mention that I think, as we saw on the weekend, a very exciting weekend in tennis, Bianca Andreescu, she said in an interview afterwards, I set my goals higher than I thought I might be able to achieve. We have to set and so we can gain a little bit of inspiration from her that, if this manual is a perfect city, on paper, then perfect. That's what we want. And so we need to set our goals high. We need to express to the whole development community, to everyone in our community, we don't want anything less than a very great city, a well-designed city. And so that's our message using this manual. And if in future we want to set in stone some of these very strong guidelines, I'm all for it. But let's take this initial step and see where it leads us. And so thank you again, and let's keep our bar high.
Mayor Verbenovich.
Thank you very much, and I too want to thank everyone who's been involved in putting this together. It's an outstanding document, in particular to Adam, Dana, and Dana for coming in during mat leave. I too want to express my thanks for that. As has been pointed out, we are a growing community, and with growth, I think it becomes ever more important that we focus on things like urban design as we see more intensification and so on happening in our community, because having a community that's walkable, that people feel like they can relate to and connect with through its urban design makes it a much more livable community. And I think this document really strives to set a tone in terms of what and how we're hoping to see this community evolve going into the future. I also like how the document interconnects with other pieces of planning policy and community policy that we've developed. Later after this issue, we're going to be dealing with Love My Hood, and we see how that sort of connects in through placemaking as part of this. We see about things like traffic calming and complete streets, and how that will ultimately relate in with this document, which we know is often one of the things we most often hear about from residents in terms of concerns around traffic safety, cycling, pedestrian access, and so on. Just yesterday, we had a big city mayor's caucus session in Toronto that Justin and I attended, and the former transportation commissioner for the city of New York under Mayor Bloomberg spoke, and certainly was very inspirational in terms of the kinds of things that they did, and what's really cool is we're starting to see some of that kind of stuff being talked about in here in our community. That's not by any way suggesting that we want to be as big as New York or anywhere close to that, quite frankly, but that doesn't mean we can't take some of those best practices and look to include them in our community as it continues to evolve in the future. So I'm certainly excited to support this, and when the time comes, Madam Chair, we can have a recorded vote. That would be wonderful.
Councillor Davey?
Thank you. I just echo the comments. I thought this report was, for the amount of information in here, I thought it was fairly easy to read. It's lots of good examples and not very many walls of text, which I really appreciate. I thought it was great work. I did want to mention that when I was going through it, my biggest concern as well was sometimes when we do these sorts of things, we do make it overly restrictive, as was mentioned by Councillor Singh, in terms of the affordability of housing. I didn't really see that. I think it's always a struggle to go for strive for the highest urban design, which oftentimes means higher cost. At the same time, if you drive up the cost of housing too much, we all know how that pans out. In fact, I'm not sure if anyone's paying attention, but the rental rates for one-bedroom apartments in Kitchener were the highest. They had the highest increase, not in the region, not in the province, but in the entire country. The month previous, 16%. 16%, that's a crazy amount of money. So we have to be very, very careful going forward that we don't, we remember those people that are struggling with the affordability. Last thing I wanted to mention is to Councillor Hernandez's point, I'm getting more and more concerns about light pollution as well. I did notice it was in the manual. There's a whole section in terms of downlighting and everything. I just want to mention that. I'm glad we caught that and I appreciate it.
Next is Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And I think, we have to be open for change, and we have to be accepting of the next evolution of our city. And I think this document such as this, and it speaks to the great work by our staff, the entire planning team, especially Adam and Dana specifically, that they put concise effort into finding, and I said this word before in my earlier questions and some comment, is through balance. It's finding the right balance to ensure that we have that desired growth of our city, growth to meet the housing stock, growth to ensure that the affordability is within the range that we would want within our community, and that happens with additional units coming online. So you cannot be too prescribed or restrictive, and this document doesn't do that. It's very suggestive language that works with the developer, ensuring this is our ideal goal as a community of how we want to build out and up specifically, and ensuring that the neighborhood at the end is the end beneficiary of good development, existing neighborhoods specifically. And I think that's entirely what we have achieved through this document. And what's more important is I like the language that there will be a continual growth of our, what the strategy is here. And that's why I caution and have concern when you end up building restrictive language or building it into it as a bylaw where it makes it set in stone. That's exactly what's going to be. And that unfortunately can end up being a bit of a barrier. This allows us to work moving forward with the development community, ensuring what is working, what is good, and what can we improve upon. And that's the ideal of a growing community. Not restriction, but continual growth and nurturing. I like what this document does. It nurtures the right growth in a community, and I want to compliment staff for that.
Councillor Marsh?
I don't believe we have a mover yet.
I don't.
I'm happy to move this, and I'd like to ask for a recorded vote at the time. And I certainly hope that we have a unanimous support for this. I also want to just quickly mention that the Great Places Awards will be this year on November 19th, and I, having been on the panel, the selection panel this year, I can say that there have been nominations for buildings that are specifically for affordability, and so we are looking to recognize good design with less expensive products as well. So that's something that I think that the city should continue to encourage as we go forward. Good design doesn't mean the most expensive.
Councillor Johnston?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to thank staff for this report. I think what you come up with here is a living document that makes this community a progressive, fun, interesting, dynamic place to live, and I think you've done an amazing job with it, so thank you very much.
I'll just give my final comments. I too just want to thank you everyone for all your hard work and effort in this. It's not something that just comes overnight. There's a lot of hard work and effort that goes into it. And as many people have mentioned, it's very readable, and it's the language is great, and it's very understandable. So thank you for that. And I think it speaks volumes that you've spent the amount of time that you needed to creating this, and that there's no opposition. There's a lot of guidelines in here, and a lot of I won't say rules, but a lot of things that the development community have to or should follow. And the fact that we don't have, we had one delegation who was supportive of what we've done is really positive. So thank you for all the energy and effort that you put into making sure that this is a great document, not only for the city and for what it's going to create within the city, but also for the people who need to use it. So thank you very much. With that, that's all the comments. It's been moved by Councillor Marsh, and recorded vote's been called. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, now we get to move on to another, in my opinion, great report. And we will call upon Josh and Jenna for the Love My Hood 3-year review. Let me put up 10. Whenever you're ready, Josh.
Okay. So hello, members of council. Thanks for having us here today. We're excited to share an update with you on the city's Love My Hood program over the last few years. I'll have a brief presentation, and then we have like a short 30-second video, and then myself and my team are here to answer any questions after all this. So I wanted to bring us back to 2015, where things kind of started. A project team was established with both staff and residents, and they came together to lead one of the most extensive engagements the city's ever done. So really reaching a ton of residents, 5,000 residents, and close to 4,000 hours of conversations, which was very exciting. And I did want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank the project team, and specifically a couple of the project team members in the audience today. So thanks Melissa Bowman and Doug McCluskey for being here. We do appreciate it. So in 2017 was when council approved the Love My Hood neighborhood strategy, which included a 3-year implementation plan, as well as reprioritizing existing funding into a neighborhood development reserve that would fund the program. The vision of the strategy I really like because it's very simple to communicate, but it's quite powerful in what it means. The whole idea of residents taking the lead, city supporting them along the way. It's a very unique approach for a city to take. And it's kind of looking at, well, residents know their neighborhoods, they live in it, they have great ideas. Let's work to support them in making those things happen through funding, tools, resources, cutting red tape. And so we do that often through the staff in the Neighborhood Development Office. We constantly support residents through that, and also our neighborhood liaisons as well. So in the neighborhood strategy, there were 32 actions. So by the end of this year, 80% of those will have been completed. So we're really excited with the progress that we've been making on some of these actions, which I should make a note, like although they're completed, they're constantly ongoing and iterating and improving and enhancing, you know, similar to any living type of process or document. but we're excited about the progress we're making there. There's also some numbers on this slide that just kind of, I know there's a lot of data in the report, and we're happy to get into that, but these are just at a high level some of those numbers that are really exciting. The number of people who got involved, the 10,000 plus hours that people have put into this program, the 90 projects over the past few years. So definitely a lot of great momentum, all at a time when trends in volunteering is changing, and yet there seems to be like an increased surge in momentum around this program for sure. This is included in the executive summary, just a quick snapshot of some of the things that have been funded over the past few years, and all this credit really has to go to the residents again and their ideas to bring forward to make these things happen. I think that if this was only led by staff, I don't know if you'd see some of these creative ideas come forward, because as I mentioned before, residents live in their neighborhoods, they know, they want to see things happen, and by them taking the lead, the projects are much more likely to be embraced by the community, especially in the short and long term. We also have a chart here that shows that from 2017 to 2019, we're looking to triple the number of neighborhoods, and so these results are really exciting. I think in the early stages of Love My Hood, a lot of the groups that have been engaged already in previous city programs and initiatives may have been sort of first at the gate in terms of accessing funding and resources and projects, and we've seen now in a couple years into the program, that's changing, and more neighborhoods are getting involved. Actually, this year, we can say that we funded 2 projects in every ward in the city. We've never been able to say that we've even funded 1 in the past couple years. So we're making headway, but we do acknowledge that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done on this, for sure. I just wanted to highlight a few unique resident-led projects. I mean, they're all unique and special in their own way, but these are just a few that I wanted to flag for you. Lakeside Park's a really interesting one, the recycling program there, because there isn't any current recycling program regionally in parks. So the group of residents came together, and Lakeside's a beautiful place, and they wanted to keep it pristine. They wanted to introduce recycling, green bin, and also a bin for cigarette butts. And the program's going strong. They have a dozen volunteers dedicated to it, so it's really exciting to see that. Also, a tunnel vision project. So there's a tunnel in one area of the city, and it's experienced some vandalism, and it kind of maybe sometimes feel unsafe. So people came together in the neighborhood to submit this idea to paint the entire tunnel with community art and murals to kind of liven it up a bit. So again, these are really exciting projects that are really resident-led coming from them, and we're just here to support them along the way. I did include a couple quotes in the presentation just because I wanted to highlight that working together relationship, which is so critical to this work, resident staff working together constantly. And the resident quote really speaks to the appreciation of the funding, but also of the staff support, you know, having someone there that they can call and help navigate City Hall and various red tape. And the staff quote speaks to sort of that change in mindset, the culture change work that we've really been doing the past few years, where we might have said no on ideas in the past. Things have definitely changed, and there's a lot more interest in sort of supporting creative outside the box ideas. So there's a number of exciting things coming next that are outlined in the report. A lot of these are outlined in more detail there. The one I wanted to mention specifically here was the streamlining of the Love My Hood grants, because currently we have 3 separate grants and different criteria and application processes and that sort of thing, and we heard from residents that streamlining of that would be helpful, you know, 1 funding pot, 1 grant application and selection committee process, and also a grant that can be a bit more flexible and open to what residents are looking for. So up till now, we haven't actually come forward asking any funding of council for the Love My Hood program. It's all been funded, staffing, and reserved through reprioritization of existing funding. This is the first time that we're coming forward requesting ongoing permanent funding, as the current funding will run out by the end of this year. So a request around matching grant funding of about $150,000 a year, and also getting into some staffing requests. So I just wanted to highlight that we currently have 9 staff that work on Love My Hood on an ongoing basis, and we're recommending to continue to have 9 staff. These requests are more about making temporary positions permanent. We currently operate on 4 staff in the NDO, so dropping back down to 2 would really impact level of service that we've been providing. And then the part-time hours increasing to full-time really helps us get out into neighborhoods, reaching more diverse audiences. We have 2 staff recommendations in the report. I won't get into these specifically. I know we're not necessarily asking for any final decisions today, but recommending that the financial impacts be referred to the 2020 budget process. So just wanted to end saying thank you to everyone who's been involved. Again, particularly want to give a shout out to the residents who have really embraced this program over the past few years, really stepped up to the plate in wanting to lead great things in their neighborhood. So I really wanted to thank them. We have a short video to play next, about 30 seconds, and it's really quick scenes, but I think each scene in the video really has a whole story on its own that we could get into. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. That's got a good impact for the end of your presentation. With that, we have a couple delegations that we're going to turn to. First, we're going to start with Melissa Bowman. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you. You had to know I wasn't just going to sit quietly in support of this. I was going to come up and speak to this.
We like listening to you.
Hello, Chair, Mayor, and Councillors. It's hard to believe that we're at 3 years of Love My Hood already. I sat here in Council chambers when Council unanimously supported Kitchener's first neighbourhood strategy. I came to Council 1 year later on behalf of the Victoria Park Neighbourhood Association to present the first neighbourhood action plan through Love My Hood. And now I'm thrilled to be here today to speak in support of the vital role Love My Hood plays in creating strong neighborhoods and in contributing to a sense of belonging for our residents. Through my experiences on being on the Neighborhood Strategy Project team, implementing our own neighborhood projects and events, and also attending Love My Hood projects in other neighborhoods, I've seen a lot of great things come out of this strategy, and I hope today that we see Council's strong support for Love My Hood moving forward. Funding support through grants have allowed neighbors across the city to bring their ideas to life, and through those events have contributed to a stronger sense of connection and community. I do want to emphasize one aspect of the neighborhood strategy, though, that may not get as much coverage, but has been essential, and that's the role of neighborhood liaisons. These staff are there to walk alongside neighbors as they work through event and project planning. They are essential supports as they help neighbors navigate the often confusing and sometimes intimidating processes at City Hall. I'm sure our newest council members can relate to feeling overwhelmed at first in trying to understand all of the things that are happening here. Having someone familiar with City Hall to not only walk you through each step as needed, but also to be your single point of contact is an absolute necessity if we want to see residents continue to engage in community building endeavors. So as much as it's important to have access to funds to run neighborhood projects, which it really is important to have those, it is equally important to have staff people there to help navigate the system. I think moving these part-time roles into permanent ones may also offer staff a bit more flexibility in reaching out and connecting with neighborhoods who have yet to engage with Love My Hood. I have chatted with my own neighborhood contact person about the possibility for more partnerships between neighborhoods across the city. For example, the Victoria Park Neighbourhood Association has been around for about 45 years. We have a history and many committed volunteers that could be of benefit to, say, a neighbourhood group that is just starting out. And I know that the VPNA would also benefit from that relationship as well, as new groups often bring an enthusiasm and excitement that longtime groups can sometimes lose. To make that happen, though, we need staff to help facilitate those connections. Last year, I had the chance to share the VPNA's experience with developing a neighborhood action plan when we were invited by Ward 5 Wildflowers Neighborhood Group to discuss their plans as they were just starting into that process. I'd love to see more of those kinds of relationships and connections develop. I love living in a city where I can so often say, well, in Kitchener, we're doing this really great thing. Let me tell you more about it. And the neighborhood strategy is definitely one of those things. It's been wonderful to see strong council support for the neighborhood strategy over the last 3 years. I ask that you continue that support today and accept the recommendations put forth in the staff report. Thanks.
Thank you, Melissa, for coming in and for your presentation. Did anyone have any questions for Melissa specifically? Yeah. Councillor Schneider?
Great. Melissa, first of all, thanks for your early involvement with Love My Hood, and you've seen it evolve and seen it grow. And this might be hard to answer, but for you and your neighbors, what would you say is the biggest impact that Love My Hood has had in your neighborhood?
There's probably been a lot of little ones, but the one that stands out to me most is probably going through that process of the neighborhood action plan. It was a bit of a big process. We were one of 2 pilot groups to do that. Again, we couldn't have done it without our neighborhood liaison helping us to navigate that process, because it was one of those things when we kind of saw what was being asked of us, we're like, oh, how do we even start? So the staff was there to support us through it all, and it was really interesting to me because, as I said, Victoria Park Neighborhood Association, we've been around for 45 years, and I'm not sure that we as neighbors had ever engaged in a process where we really purposefully asked neighbors what they wanted in their neighborhood, what they wanted it to look like, what they wanted from a neighborhood association. And I'm not sure, I know I was listening to staff person Mr. May speak on the radio to Love My Hood, and he was saying, had you asked him what Love My Hood would look like on day one, it looked very different. That was related to our experience as well, that if you had asked me what I thought our neighborhood priorities were, after we went through that process, I was surprised by some of the results, and it really has helped us make a plan moving forward.
And with what you've been able to do through Love My Hood, do you feel that your neighborhood is more connected and more together and has a little bit more neighborhood pride?
Absolutely. I think Love My Hood is great for all of those things. I'd also speak to, Victoria Park Neighborhood Association has been around. It's been running things for a long time. What I've really appreciated seeing in the last 3 years is the development of these little pocket neighborhoods. I can think of 3 or 4 right in technically the Victoria Park Neighborhood Association's boundaries, but it's neighbors of 5 to 10 to 15, 20 people who are like, oh, I don't have to wait for the affiliated neighborhood association to do something. I can take the initiative, and that little idea I saw on Pinterest one day, maybe I can make that happen in my neighborhood. And I think that is what has me most excited about the Love My Hood strategy.
Fabulous. And I do want to thank you for your zeal on this, and we're helping out in Ward 5, and I hope that if any other ward needs some advice and a little enthusiasm, that you'd jump in there.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks.
Councillor Ioannidis?
Thank you, Chair Galloway Seelock, and thanks, Melissa, for coming in. And I really do appreciate your perspective as being one of the members that dealt with this early in the beginning. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, in the beginning, when you went through this consultation discussion, was there ever discussion about fair equity among the wards in dollar-wise?
Are you saying as the Victoria Park Neighborhood Association when we were going through the neighborhood action plan? Sorry, can you just reword the question?
Okay, when you were going through the Love My Hood discussion with the community groups as part of the Love My Hood team, did you ever discuss fair equity among the neighboring wards?
Absolutely. I think equity is played a huge part in this. And I'm actually excited that we've got the creation of the Mayor's Task Force on Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity, because I could see Love My Hood and that task force really benefiting from the work of each other. I would say I am not surprised at all in the way, the uptake that we've seen on Love My Hood. It makes sense to me that some of those more engaged, well-resourced neighborhood associations with volunteers were the first ones to kind of say, hey, let's run with this. And as I said, one of the most exciting things for me is now seeing other neighbors in other wards or in other areas that are maybe not part of a neighborhood association saying, oh, this is something that we can do, that we can take this on ourselves. I'd also say, I think as councillors, you have a really exciting role in spreading the great work and word of Love My Hood. You are the first person to kind of be a champion for the work that Love My Hood is doing. I know when I see councillors showing up at events that 10 or 12 neighbors have put together, that is a real boost to the work that they're doing. So I think equity is absolutely a part of, it's enveloped in what Love My Hood is. And I would hope that just because some of those more engaged neighborhoods were first to take it up, that doesn't mean that's what it will look like forever.
Okay, my other question, wouldn't you think it'd be more prudent if it was based on a population per population? Because that would really truly represent fair equity.
Perhaps. I don't see it as playing out that way. I see Love My Hood as being a resource to empower residents to do what they see makes most sense in their neighborhood. I don't see how you could force it on people by dividing it up by ward or by population segment. In fact, it's been interesting to see. I know that there's been some neighborhood groups across ward boundaries who have connected on some of these projects. And as I mentioned, I would love to see more of that. I think there's a real opportunity for that. I don't think wards should play a part in this. I think it's about all the neighborhoods in the city coming together and doing what works well in their own little neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's all the questions. Oh, Mayor Verbanovich.
Thank you, and thanks, Melissa, for coming in today. And I wanted to explore a little more, because these are some of the questions I have for staff as well, but on the neighborhood action plan piece in particular. And, you know, one of the things that we haven't necessarily seen a lot of uptake on that, and I wanted to sort of get staff's perspective on that. But do you think there are ways that we can encourage neighborhoods that maybe have been reluctant thus far to participate in action plans to actually take that leap and get more involved from that perspective? Because that is something that for me is something I'd really like to see us sort of focus on in phase 2.
I think I can see what's great about the Love My Hood strategy is I think there is something in there for all neighborhood groups. For me, one of the reasons why we kind of why the VPNA jumped on the neighborhood action plan is, again, being around for such a long time and thinking, I'm not sure that we've actually figured out what we're doing exactly here. And this seemed like a great way to kind of identify that. So to me, the neighborhood action plan would really benefit neighborhood associations in that situation, and also neighborhoods that are just starting out. It's a great process to go through. It can feel a little bit intimidating, so I think there could be some discussions around how to make that process a bit more streamlined and a little bit more user-friendly. I don't think some of the materials that the VPNA contributed to makes it any less intimidating, and if you recall our minutes, it was like an 80-page document that we created through that process, just because we were trying to figure out all of the ins and outs of what making up a neighborhood action plan would look like. I think it's one of those things when you have 3, 4, 5 volunteers who are on a board, a neighborhood board, who are maybe passionate about making sure we can do a street party each year. That doesn't always translate to the same people who want to figure out what the neighborhood's priorities are. So I think there may need to be some work done on how do you best find the people who are passionate about figuring out what a neighborhood's priorities are and bringing them into the fold, because I think there are people who want to make events happen, and then there are people who are just like, how do you make good neighborhoods happen? And I think it's just finding those people and plugging them in on the same team.
Okay, and the other question I had for you is, I think part of what we've seen is that there's been less uptake in some parts of the city, and that could be from a variety of reasons, socioeconomic issues, you know, and as a result, people not, you know, having time, whatever. Do you think there's, as we move into subsequent phases of this potentially, do you think there's ways of actually sort of cross-pollinating neighborhoods and in fact looking to how we might encourage active people such as yourself and others in different neighborhoods actually maybe even help and support with some of those neighborhoods that have been less engaged to maybe encourage them a little bit?
Absolutely. I think one of the things I love about neighborhood work is that every neighborhood brings something unique to the table. I loved meeting with the Wildflowers group in Ward 5. They were a newer group. They were so excited about they just wanted to take it all in. And I think we were able to offer something with some of our experience of going through a lot of those processes. I think we need some sort of like neighborhood matchmaking service through Love My Hood, because I think there is a real need and a real benefit for connecting neighborhoods across the city and across wards. So.
What's that app called where you swipe left or right? I don't know. We need
Neighborhood Tinder? Well,
yeah,
Neighborhood
Tinder, I think, for the next phase. Okay, thank you, and thank you. Those are all the questions I have. And Madam Chair, I don't know if there's more delegations, but I have some questions of staff, and at the appropriate time would also like to move a recommendation.
There's one more delegation, and then we'll have questions of staff. Up next, thanks, Melissa. Up next is Myron Steinman. Welcome, Myron.
Thank you. Ms. Galloway Seaway. I didn't know how to spell your last name, so I didn't include it in the...
That's okay.
I have given a presentation to councillors. So I'm waiting for this clock to go. It's starting to go. I am here representing the WRCGN, and WRCGN is very pleased with the City of Kitchener as strengthening neighbors. We're very pleased. And we believe we have a good, excellent relationship with planning and planning departments and Live Your Hood probably as well. If I have time, I'd like to read from an unpublished document from 2005 from the Victoria Hills Community Garden, local history as told by Christina Wiley, City of Kitchener Council member, to Rick Schipling, Community Gardening Objectives, Come to Fruition, 2005, unpublished. I have 6 points there about that garden that neighborhood got established in 1993. However, my wife always critiques me I don't tell enough about myself. So I am a 4-year member of Cherry Park Gardening Neighborhood Association Steering Committee and a 1-year rep to the WRCGN. The Kitchener Cherry Park Neighborhood Association has water taps to 2 of our 3 gardens. We have water access from a water tap to 2 of our 3 gardens. And this was a major concern when I talked to Greg this morning, was the availability of water to the remaining gardens. That I believe we have 78 gardens in Waterloo Region. I believe there's 48 in the City of Kitchener, but I'm not sure. That's an unreliable source. And $1,000 is not enough to get water access to these gardens. Right now, these gardens are trucked by big trucks into bunkers about this size, about the size of this desk, and they're trucked there. And that is a nagging concern. So a little more about myself. I told you I am a 1-year rep to the Waterloo Region Garden Waterloo Region Community Garden Network. Okay, I'm a great-grandson of Daniel H. Steinman. My grandmother is Katie Erb, is an ancestor of John L. Erb. That's on my dad's side. My grandmother on my mother's side was Aliva Zaire, and my grandfather was Homer Schagel. You may recognize these names. They are Amish Mennonite community names. They're also Swiss names, Swiss Mennonite names. We are not related to, we're not named after, Erb Street was not named after us, but I just went on a nice trip to the John L. homestead. Okay, so in principle, I am not against anything that Melissa has said. I would like to acknowledge we're guests with this land. The city of Kitchener, Waterloo Kitchener, is the largest metropolitan area on the Grand Weather watershed. I believe Kitchener Ward 9, which includes Cherry Park neighborhood and Victoria Park neighborhood, is a leader in this area. I'm also a member of Kitchener Centre at the municipal level, where Laura May is our MPP and where Reg is our MP currently. So, I am concerned about the concentration of buildings more than 3 stories high. I would like that there would, or this is not from me, we would like to allocate space for community gardens with new subdivisions, at least 1 plot per subdivision for community gardens. Land, second point, land is often a premium with decent, truly affordable housing. Land that was not available to this population is being removed from access from lower incomes. And then the last thing is, of course, water is trucked to bunkers in, I don't know if it's 48 gardens in the city of Kitchener. I don't know if that source is reliable, but it's trucked there, and we're concerned about that. And I was reading the Levy HUD document, and it only allows for a $1,000 grant. And I don't believe a $1,000 grant will pay for a truck to come and deliver water there, or at least get a hose there, a tap there. In Cherry Park, in 2 of our 3 gardens, we do have gardens. And I see I don't have time to read from this document by Christina Wiley. But I will submit the first page for history. It's been written by P. Carroll. So, thank you.
Thanks, Myron, for coming in and giving your presentation. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Myron, for coming in and sharing your perspectives. I take it then that you're very supportive of staff's recommendations, if this is approved, that they will remove that cap of $1,000 for community gardens. You're happy with? I take it that you're happy with that.
I didn't speak directly to anybody from the WRCGN about this, and the chair of my neighborhood association is out of town until tomorrow. But for myself as an individual, I'm not against that at all. I'm supportive of that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thanks, Myron, for coming. So regarding the water, how does Cherry Park fill the new Willow Green garden?
Which one?
Tank? Isn't that the one that doesn't have a tap? The one where the cob oven is?
The one that doesn't have a tap is the one where we discovered some artifacts of the Neutral Nation, and that's the site right behind the Habitat property.
Okay, so what's your water source back there?
I believe we still get that from a neighbor.
Okay, so that's another.
So that's very inaccessible. Actually, it's very inaccessible to get to that space. There is the region is spending $2 million to build a connective hub from the Iron Horse Trail to the Ion Station that is supposed to be built on Victoria and King, and it will skirt on the other side of Westmount Creek. So there is at this point, no way to fill that. We do have 3 raised gardens in Gilder Green that have a water tap, and we do have I have a plot in Old Willow Green, and we have water tap access there.
At the Old Willow.
But the Cobb Oven location, will continue to get access. There's no way you can get a truck in there.
No, that's why I asked, because you said it was filled by truck. Okay, I might have a question for staff about that later, but thank you.
And that is a very important garden for us.
No, I know it is. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you very much, Myron, for coming in. We appreciate your presentation.
May I submit this document?
Yeah, you can give it to the clerk. Thank you.
I'm just submitting the first part of it because this is the Victoria Hills Community Garden local history as told by Christina Wiley to Rick Shipling, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right, Community Garden Objectives Come to Fruition 2005, unpublished document by Carol.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, you're welcome.
Okay, we have questions of staff. I had written down the order that they had come in previously. We'll start with Mayor Vrbanovich. Hold on.
Thank you very much, Chair Galloway Seelock, and thank you to staff for a very comprehensive report that highlights, I think, many of the successes of this program, but also looks to the future and some of the opportunities from the lessons learned in terms of things we can tackle in the future. One of the questions that you heard me ask the delegation, Melissa, was around the neighborhood action plans. I'm wondering if staff had, since they had a bit of a heads up as a result of that other question, have been able to sort of put any thought to, how we might get more uptake on that going in the future.
Josh?
So through the chair, I think Melissa alluded to it well that, different neighborhoods have different interests and capacity. And so we've seen an increase from residents in more of the project-based type initiatives, like a one-off type of thing, like a traffic calming initiative or a street party. I think the challenges with the NAP is that it's looking more broadly than that, looking at visioning and, typically a 3 to 5 year window of ideas. And so that level of responsibility and planning is a bit different than sort of a one-off project. So as Melissa mentioned, the role of the neighborhood liaison and staff really supporting them through that, I think, is critical. But what we've also learned is that, maybe we need to rethink our approach to neighborhood action plans. I think we saw a good variety between the Victoria Park one and Wildflower. Like, one was focused on neighborhood type initiatives in the downtown, another one had a big virtual reality component. But maybe managing our expectations about what an NAP needs to look like. It doesn't have to be a 50-page document, although it could be for some neighborhoods. And I think in the report we even mentioned, perhaps looking at like a 1 to 5 year time frame. So even if some resident groups want to maybe just lead an NAP in a shorter time frame, maybe that's okay given their capacity and what they have going on in their schedules.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, is that perhaps some neighborhoods may be, at a capacity level where they could sort of deal with a version, a basic version of an action plan and come back then a year or two down the road and actually look at sort of the next steps to it. And sort of bite off things in chunks that they can chew. My second question is in terms of the fact that we have seen in some neighborhoods more uptake and some less, and we can attribute that to a variety of things and maybe have some perspectives. But in particular, I'm wondering, how can we actually target support in neighborhoods where we're not seeing that level of uptake in terms of some of the applications in the future, because I think that's important.
You can just leave your mic on.
Oh, okay, sure. Through the chair. I think that more targeted engagement to a neighborhood level is really important. So rather than more broad sort of citywide marketing of the Love My Hood program, I think going into a neighborhood, like again, typically the neighborhood liaisons do that in their jobs, but really like focusing in. Could mean going door to door. It could mean different strategies in order to reach different folks. We actually have a garden in Kitchener where the majority of the gardeners don't speak English. So that's a whole other challenge that we now have to figure out, okay, how are we going to communicate with this group? So I think even things like language translation or different things that you would do on a smaller scale neighborhood level. I'm not suggesting we would necessarily translate for an entire citywide neighborhood, but on a few streets or whoever might be involved in that, I think that targeted engagement is important. And then also that role of the neighborhood liaisons, you know, going up to full time, having more time to kind of get into neighborhoods, talk to folks, you know, because as I mentioned earlier, funding's one part of it, but I think people need different level of support when it comes to these things. Some groups can run with it and no problem. We barely help them out along the way, and other groups need more of that support. So it's not like a one-size-fits-all kind of approach.
Okay, thanks. My last question, I know there's been a lot of positive uptake in the community. I mean, I've heard all sorts of positive things from people in all wards in the city, but I've also heard positive uptake from people in other communities, you know, and even most recently, even Mayor Tory asked me for some information because he thought this was something that maybe even Toronto might pursue in some way, shape, or form. I know we've won a lot of awards with Love My Hood since its inception. Can you touch on that at all?
Sure. So through the chair, Love My Hood in total has received 4 awards in the past few years for the program. Specifically, a couple more national awards. We got an award for planning excellence from the Canadian Institute of Planners, as well as the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators Willis Award for Innovation. So it's nice to see that recognition spreading. And we have so much lessons learned that we're happy to share with other people calling us. We have a call actually from someone from Australia that's heard about our program and wants to come here on a tour and learn more. So we're all open to sharing that stuff.
Great, thanks.
All right, we have pretty much everyone in the queue, so I just give you that piece of information. Councillor Singh.
I'll try to do my best to be concise.
No, it wasn't you specific, it was meant for everyone.
No, I know, but I took the comment and I'm trying to be reflective of myself. So I think without a doubt, I don't think anyone could say that this program was not successful. I think the intended goal was to figure out as a planning document or a community engagement document to excite residents, to bring forward ideas, and that's exactly what's happened. That being said, the inequity does exist. And so in no way through my questions I want there to be a perception that, you know, I'm not supportive of this being permanent, I'm supportive of staff being a permanent position. I think that needs to be something solid going forward. But I do have a serious concern when there's $6,000 being spent over 2 years into one area of our city, while $88,000 being spent another. Now, mind you, doesn't matter where it's spent, that's good development happening there. But the problem is the inequity over time. It's not an aspect of 2 years, it's an aspect over a decade or more, where a continuation of engagement with residents, there were more in one area than the other, and that starts becoming a problem. What I want to hear from staff is, going forward, as a support of what the suggestions are coming before committee right now, what does staff have in mind that we will ensure in another 2 years or a year? I don't think we could wait 2 years. I think we do need to have a reflection again a year from now, because this is drastic. 6,000 and 88,000 is drastic. How will staff, or what, is there an action plan to ensure that the money is being spread around? That's question one. The other is, can there be definitive language within the policy? And I'm not saying that's necessarily a time for a member of council or myself to throw out there. I think this is something that we have to put some mind to. The definitive language that ensures that there is a balance of funding into all parts of our community. And the reason why I say this is, Not every community needs are the same. Not every community can say, community garden will animate or bring a sense of belonging to my neighborhood. Maybe the need is bigger and the need requires more monies. So if we can have an equitable model that can maybe even build over time, if someone doesn't want to access it, they don't have to, but a year 2 or 3 down the road, that pot builds up, well, guess what? They can be energized, say, we want that gazebo, it's going to cost $100,000. But that's going to bring a place where people can come, neighbors can sit down, we can really, we can benefit from it. That's not a model that exists. The funding framework doesn't allow that. Can that be a way forward as well? That's a question to you.
So through the chair, I'll attempt to answer your first part of your question about the equity concerns. And I think Melissa touched on it a bit in her delegate presentation. She mentioned the mayor's task force on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
No.
And I understand.
I don't think it does. No, it doesn't. I think it got that.
Councillor Singh, you've asked your questions. Staff can answer. You can rebut after. I don't think interrupting them when they're trying to answer your question is something we should do.
No, I just wanted a clarification, that's all. But this was more of engagement I was trying to focus on, but that's fine. You can ask the question and I guess.
So the reason I mentioned that task force is only because I think through that work, we'll see some longer term changes come about in a lot of different areas in the city. But you specifically asked me about what action plans or shorter term solutions that we're focusing on. So we do actually have some proposed changes in the report to address some of those equity concerns, and we've included that. You can find some of that on page 515. But a couple of clauses that we've introduced. So we've said now that a neighborhood group cannot receive funding in 2 consecutive years. So that's new. We don't have any language about that, and that's a new clause that we're adding in. So it's basically if you get a grant in 1 year, you're taking a year off, maybe exploring something different, reapply in a year. The other thing is we've also strengthened some of the language. You mentioned, increasing that. So we've strengthened the language around more the equitable distribution of grant funds and prioritizing neighborhoods that are not traditionally active or engaged, new and emerging groups. So it's really important when the selection committee approves these projects that they look at that word by word listing that we sent you earlier where you mentioned 6,000 versus 80,000. Those are facts and data that the selection committee should be keeping in mind as they approve these projects. And what we're saying here is that we've strengthened that language to prioritize those other areas that are new, emerging, aren't accessing as much funds. The other thing that we introduced, it was more of an administrative change to the grant, was we got rid of the rolling basis you can apply. Because what we found was that, again, the groups that are ready to go, they're right at the gate applying, and it's a first come, first serve kind of approach. And so now we've sort of introduced these quarterly deadlines where now the selection committee can make decisions looking at all the projects in front of them and then decide based on the updated criteria, make their decisions on that.
So I like the last part where it's a rolling deadline as opposed to, whoever's first to go. But I do have a concern about the other, and I wasn't trying to interrupt you because I don't like what you were hearing. Mm-hmm. I was just trying to specify and say, I think the focuses of those 2 committees are quite different in my mind. Mm-hmm. What the Mayor's Task Force on Diversity and Inclusion is quite different. Sure, it will engage and then, bring about conversations amongst different community groups, but I don't think that necessarily speaks to the Love My Hood strategy, which is aspect of funding, inequity of aspect of funding. That's where my focus was, and that's why I wanted to bring clarity on that the answer is answer to what I'm asking, not going somewhere else. But I think, you did your best, so I appreciate that. My concern is from what your answer was on ineligibility of a neighborhood group that has been successful one, but then they wait a year off and they come back again. The problem there is, I can speak to my ward specifically, there's maybe 3 or 4 organizations that are somewhat organized. It's a suburban neighborhood. There are not a lot of deep issues that streetwise that people would probably want to come forward, but they're more involved organizations like neighborhood associations. Well, guess what? If they have to be off again, they don't have eligible all over again. I think that inequity is going to even broaden instead of becoming better because there's lack of smaller groups available amongst my ward. But anyways, I will key back in because I do have some more questions if you want to answer that. Or I can key back in afterward.
Did you have an answer for that?
Well, I just wanted to make a comment through the chair about the types of neighborhood groups that have been accessing this funding. It's only actually been about 20% have been organized neighborhood groups, so I totally understand your concerns, Councillor Singh, and I appreciate that. But we have noticed sort of that even informal groups of neighbors coming together are the ones actually bringing forward the application. So I don't always think it has to be an organized group, although I understand what you're saying about they might have more capacity and organization behind them. But I just wanted to share that stat.
Okay, up next is Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Galloway Seelock. Thanks, Josh, for your comments and all that stuff that you mentioned with Councillor Singh, because a lot of that has been my primary concern from the very beginning of this process. And I was rest assured by staff that this would not be happening. And when I do the calculations, as Councillor Singh mentioned, 88,000 to 6,000, that really upsets me. Beyond belief, it upsets me. And I know you had mentioned some of the processes, but that doesn't make me feel comfortable at all. So I have a recommendation that prior to the motion that I want to put forward.
Can I see it before it goes on?
For the budget 2020 budget process, that I want to see a transparent, equitable process in place. Period. I don't want to hear this story about, well, this neighborhood was organized and this or not. I don't want any of that. It has to be fair.
Diana, do you want to put this up? I presume there was no question in that, so we will move on to Councillor Chapman. Oh, hold on, I just got to click in. There you go. There you go.
Yes, thank you. I'm a big supporter of Love My Hood, but I do have a couple questions. On page 5.8, under figure 2 and the note that's on the page, what do you mean by grassroots projects? Because I would consider all of these grassroots projects.
Through the chair. So we specifically mean when we say grassroots projects is like projects where they may not have gone through the formal Love My Hood funding process. Like as Melissa mentioned, having a single point of contact, having the project be reviewed by the committee, getting funding approved. A lot of the times groups just approach us saying, hey, we want to do this thing and we have the money. We just need to figure out how to do it. So that's kind of how we've categorized the grassroots, but I think you're right, it's all grassroots. It was just for the purpose of creating a differentiation between them not getting actual funding, but still getting support and us helping them navigate everything.
Okay. And this is sort of bouncing off Councillor Ioannidis' and Councillor Singh's question. On page 518, we have, in the graph, we have grant funds awarded, grant funds requested, and then those that were ineligible. I presume the ineligible ones is they just didn't fit the requirements or it was an incomplete application form, etc. But my question is more related to those that were requested but not funded. Do you have any data on what wards those unfunded projects were in, and maybe a general summary or sense of what types of projects were not funded and why not? And I'm not asking for detail by detail, but...
Yeah, so through the chair, just to clarify, ineligible projects would have been things that didn't meet the grant criteria when the selection committee met to review it. But we did get 37 eligible applications come forward that we weren't able to fund just because we didn't have the funds. So there were 37 projects, could have been funded, they were great, and that value was something like $450,000 estimate. Now I don't have all the data in front of me on where all those 37 would be on a map. We could get that information, but I think the important thing is that there were 37 applications that we could have funded. but we just weren't able to. So that one really speaks to the demand in the program.
Yeah, and I appreciate the demand. I mean, it's demonstrated here in the graph. If we were to look at those that were not funded, do you think the concerns around greater equitable distribution of funds around the city and the different wards, would that have been, if there was a concerted effort to focus in on that with those eligible applications, do you think those concerns would be sort of resolved or addressed?
Through the chair, I do think over the past year anyway, like especially in 2019, we've definitely been trying to make more of an effort to move the dial on that stuff. Again, there's still a ton of work that we need to do on that topic, and I totally acknowledge that. But we are reaching more people, and I think we're seeing that happen. As I mentioned earlier, there's at least 2 projects in every ward now. We weren't even able to reach that level of engagement a couple of years ago. So the dial is moving. I recognize it could be slow and there's more work to be done. But the grant selection committee is pretty aware of the need to see a spread of these projects throughout the community. And actually the grant criteria specifically favors those projects, and they should be thinking of that when they do think of that when they make their decisions.
Okay. I'm running out of time. Just one thing about the neighborhood action plan. I'm glad to see that it's being rethought and reconfigured. I think the problem with it is that it leaves out those small, I'll use the words, grassroots organizations that don't have the structure, the liaison or the support that the neighborhood associations have, for example. So it can be a bit daunting, and I think it's good to sort of recognize the smaller projects in a more proactive way.
Yeah, for sure. And I should clarify through the chair that single point of contact approach that Melissa was referring to, we do offer that across the board to anybody who calls our office. So whether or not they're getting funding, we still assign somebody to work with the group to figure things out. So I just want to make it clear, like any small neighborhood group that needs any support whatsoever, we're totally there for them to help out. Whether it's funding, great, but if not, emails, meetings, we do all that.
Okay, thank you.
Up next is Councillor Michaud.
Thank you, Councillor Galloway-Seelock. This is a wonderful program, there's no question. You guys have done an amazing job. I've been part of a couple of different neighborhoods and seen you actually in action, and you've just excelled in all levels. The one question, I am concerned with the inequity part of it, but I'm not sure that it's the fault of the program, nor the neighborhoods. I think it's just maybe the process of building on what we've already got that's so great. Like I'm not sure that it's time to, consider, I do have a question, sorry. I'm not sure that it's time to consider pulling back on different areas for the sake of having another one grow. That said, for the single support contact, if you were to get the extra staff that you wanted, and I think you might have said this already, but would you focus on the neighborhoods that are clearly not as, I'm not going to say not as engaged or don't have the ability to form their own activities?
Through the chair, yes, definitely. I think the request to have the part-time hours bumped to full-time, that extra time should be spent in the neighborhoods, reaching those different folks. And I want to kind of acknowledge too that that could be a big body of work, depending. Like if there's no interest in a neighborhood and we're trying to, go in there and drum up some support, but still honor that resident-led piece of it. It's not about us coming in and dictating. There's a lot of work involved. There's meetings, there's discussions, there's conversations that maybe groups that have the capacity, they can breeze through some of those steps. So definitely yes, and definitely we want our focus to be unique to the neighborhood we're supporting, not a one-size-fits-all in how we work with them.
So this could be a second step to growing this Love My Hood program. I mean, it's already it's taken off. It's kind of, I mean, when you look at the data of some of the neighborhoods, they've just done it on their own, like a lot of them, right? You said that. So this could be, and what Melissa had alluded to is you create some synergies between neighborhoods. And I think the challenge is when I see the numbers that you presented, in certain wards, there isn't much activity going on compared to other wards. And I guess that's where the challenge will lie.
Yeah, for sure. I think through the chair, another comment I'd like to make is around the culture change piece with a lot of these projects. We have never done them before. We're looking at a project like, okay, we're going to have to figure out how to support this. And I think what I've learned is that the early few ones has really helped us understand how do we make this easier for the next time. So doing a picnic shelter in one of the wards, well, now we kind of have a better understanding of how to do those kind of projects. And so then when other groups apply in underserved areas, it may not or should not take as long of a time.
And thus be less frustrating for them.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you. Next is Councillor Johnston.
Thank you. And through the chair, I would like to thank the Love My Hood team. You probably know that I think this is an absolutely amazing initiative. I've been at different conferences where the initiative has received awards, and I've been so proud that this is a Made in Kitchener solution to helping our neighborhoods build and thrive. So it's really exciting. I did have a few questions around it. I want to start by saying that I will 100% support the amendment that Councillor Ioannidis has put in front of us. And I'll preface my remarks by saying, having been a former school board trustee, we would notice with our schools in our have and have not neighborhoods that schools could fundraise and be able to put in an amazing playground in some areas, and then in other neighborhoods they just didn't have the capacity perhaps or the ability to fundraise and do that same thing. So this is an attempt to kind of level the playing field, and I think it's really important for us to consider, and certainly I'll be supporting it because of that. I'd love to see too more communication. Again, I'm always happy to meet with you. I want to know when people approach you. If there's anyone from my ward that approaches you and has an idea, please make sure that you bring me in. I'm happy to connect with them and make sure that we kind of keep the process going. I'm introducing you to people. I want to know what the results of that are and kind of what your follow-up is with that. And because I feel like perhaps we can connect you, and then maybe people who come together, maybe it's one or two neighbors, they get together to connect with you, but then, they might hear about the process and go, and maybe back off a little bit because it sounds a little intimidating. So keep us in that loop. Like, I'm happy to help you move things forward because that's so important to our neighborhoods to grow. And if they need that little bit of inspiration, or we'll find some people to help you. I think that the councillors around the table are happy to kind of keep that moving forward, and are excited to do that, because again, we know our wards best. And when I look at the list of things that have been funded in my ward, for example, I see that there's some bigger money things that have gone to kind of like the bigger, more I'm going to say institutionally related initiatives, whereas kind of those smaller grassroots things I think can use that boost. So keep us in the loop. We're happy to help you and move forward whatever we can. Thank you.
Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Galloway-Seelock. Again, I love this program. I want to know what we as councillors can do to maybe help the inequity situation. I know I could probably benefit from sitting down with staff and saying, here are some of the ideas that, you might be able to bring forth, or someone comes to you. I can speak, I've had a lot of people talking about traffic calming, and I've been able to connect them with Jenna, who's connected with them, and, solutions and results and success has been had by that. But How do you see the role of us as councillors? Could we maybe have some quarterly meetings to find out what are some of the needs that you're hearing about in your ward, and who could we contact to make some of this happen?
Mm-hmm. Through the chair, I think that's a great idea, and I think we can definitely do a better job engaging with councillors throughout the whole process. Those emails really help, and oftentimes a lot of these projects start with a conversation between people interested in an idea, and then we meet and move it forward. The fortunate thing that we have is really good data about the different projects and the types of projects and what was ineligible and couldn't get funded, what could have got funded. And so we can meet and talk about all those things, and even visually kind of see areas of the city that, you know, we might want to focus more efforts on. So we're definitely open to ongoing meetings, collaborations, ribbon cutting celebrations, and other types of things. I think, as Melissa said, residents really appreciate that, you know, 12 residents coming together and the councillors there. So yeah, anything we can do to help you with that, we're open. But we're definitely, that whole Love My Hood line connection, we've got the phone line, the email, it's important to us just to keep those communication channels open. So definitely happy to work with all of you.
I imagine too that possibly us using our social media platforms to solicit projects, ideas, to maybe seed some ideas might help, and perhaps we could work with our communications department and have some messaging on that. So
for sure,
with that, the equity thing is important, but we're looking at things here that are resident-led and city-supported, not city-led and resident-supported. So we need to get those ideas coming in so that there can be equity.
Right, and we do have, through the chair, a very strong presence online with social media and with the website, tons of visits on the website, I think over 120,000 page views since we've started. So yeah, we can put a package together, materials, brochures, we can work together, exchanging that kind of stuff. The mayor mentioned John Tory showed an interest, we gave them a whole package of stuff. Like, we've got a ton of things that we can sit down on, talk about, and share resources to help spread the word, for sure.
Okay, I know you've got a lot of lessons learned, and I'm glad to see those incorporated. One of the things that I was involved in was the first community garden at a city-owned community center, Stanley Park Community Center. We got it done. It took about 2 years. So I'm wondering if from that, the next time another community center wants to do that, do we keep that, do we have the template in place, and that we can squeeze that time down and direct them and make it a lot easier?
For sure. Through the chair, we definitely track all those processes and hiccups that we come up across the way it happens, right? So we're learning as we go, but we document everything. And so we have standard operating procedures that we've been developing for things like how to install a bench, how to do a garden, and that speaks to the point I'm trying to say around the equity concerns, and let's make it easier for people to get this stuff in the ground. The first early ones, there's challenges and we learn as we go, but we definitely keep track of all that information and learnings and apply it for the next project. Our single point of contact approach, you know, they're sort of the gateway to City Hall, but actually we often have 15 to 20 divisions on a project, supporting, legal's helping out, risk management, transportation, you know, so we're coordinating all those people behind the scenes, and that's all driven by, you know, process and documentation, just to kind of keep us organized, you know.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thanks.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Chair Galloway-Sealock. So I'm very pleased, as I have been from the beginning, to be a champion of the Love My Hood work that we are doing as a city, and that our staff here, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing on it. I really appreciate it. I cannot support what's before us here in terms of the amendment. I absolutely will support the recommendations from staff. I absolutely agree that we need more equity. We do need to see staff take more proactive steps in moving along neighborhoods that have not yet been engaged. But I think that we have other opportunities for equity. I guess I'll add those to my comments later. A couple questions. One is, in your recommendations, you mentioned that you're going to combine the 3 streams into one. When it comes to, I was pleased to see that sorry, I do have a question here somewhere. I was pleased to see that the privately owned properties will be allowed to submit as well. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to that. Have you seen some successes with privately owned properties or property owners engaging with the Love My Hood?
Through the chair, we have seen some interest in that, little interest, but it's there, and I think there's opportunities to kind of see that growing. And actually, Paul invited me to present at the ECDEV Advisory Committee a few months back, and that opened up some more opportunities with different businesses and real estate. And so I think there's opportunities, and it's a growing thing, for sure.
Thanks. And then you also mentioned in your recommendations that you want to, can you please just highlight some of the changes that you're looking to implement should the recommendation that you're giving goes through?
Sure. Through the chair, I can, if you want to refer to page 515, I can give a quick high-level overview of some of the changes we're proposing to make to the grant. It starts just at the bottom of the page there, but increase the funding available for each project from $15,000 to $30,000. So I think that will help alleviate some of the concerns the delegate had around the community garden aspect and that $1,000 cap. We recognize that, and so we've increased to $30,000. I talked about the neighborhood group not receiving funding in 2 consecutive years. I'm on the next page now. Looking at strengthening the evaluation criteria to new and emerging groups, as I've talked about. The next one is really creating one single selection committee. Prior, we've had 3 in 3 different forms, so really just streamlining that and having 4 staff and 6 volunteers sit on that committee. That's a change in the makeup there to have a greater resident focus. You mentioned the private property, so we're looking at exploring and supporting more of those types of projects with a cap of $10,000 there and $2,000 for events. And as I mentioned before, removing that $1,000 limit for community gardens. And this is a really big change, but we heard this 2 years ago from gardeners where they said there's no grant for existing gardens. So doing away with the community garden grant and consolidating it with the matching grant actually now allows us to support existing gardens, and there's tons throughout the city. And continuing the quarterly intake period for the grant. So those are the major sort of changes we're looking at making. Even just the last one alone led to huge changes in how we're making decisions around approving these grants. So I'm looking forward to seeing all these combined together will hopefully help us move forward towards that equity goal.
Thank you. And you mentioned in earlier responses to questions that 20% of the grants went to organized groups. Do you mean neighborhood associations specifically?
Yeah, like neighborhood associations with a board, and they're organized. About 80% of the projects went to groups that just, neighbors coming together and making something happen. Which was the intended focus, right?
That's the intent, is the resident-led. And so just final question, maybe a little bit further to Mayor Verbanovic's questions around this idea to have equal funding for each ward. What would be some of the ramifications, do you think, of having pots of money that would be just equal for each ward?
Through the chair, I think the challenge could be, and Melissa alluded to this a bit, is that like neighborhoods, we didn't define neighborhoods purposely years ago because people had different ideas of what their neighborhood could look like. So I think thinking in ward boundaries like that could be restrictive to some of the creative ideas people might have. So I do think there could be challenges with taking an approach like that. I think what we're seeing is over time we're getting there, and hopefully some of these changes will help us move further.
Michael May wanted to add something?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, just to add to that comment. I think between 2017 and 2019, we've seen a tripling in the number of individual neighborhoods that we're supporting. So I would say when Councillor Ioannidis and others raised this issue back in 2017, we made changes that have clearly had a positive impact. We're here to you today to say we have more changes that we think can continue to diversify the neighborhoods. So we've got policy changes that we're recommending that strengthen the criteria for neighborhoods that haven't had Love My Hood support before. I truly believe that adding more neighborhood liaison hours to go from part-time to full-time will give us the staff resources to go out and support residents in neighborhoods that haven't tackled Love My Hood before. My concern with black and white approach where we divide all of the funding down 10 lines is that good projects will go unfunded if they just happen to be in an active ward, and bad projects will get funded if they happen to be in a ward that isn't active. And so I think what staff is saying is we don't need that blunt of an instrument. We have improved, we've seen improvements and we can continue to improve, but I wouldn't want to get to a point, I'm not aware of any other program, there may be one other where council has said you must divide the funding 10 ways. And so I'm reluctant to go that way. If you direct us to do that, we'll come back for sure, as we always do, but I think there are some risks.
Thank you. Up next is Councillor Gazzola.
How long has this program been in place?
Through the chair, council approved the program in 2017.
So it's been in place for 3 years?
That's right.
Yeah. Can you provide us with 3 years of detailed statements of what costs have actually been incurred? I don't see those anywhere. Actually, I've been after this for since inception, but I've never really seen anything. So can you, at this point, or specifically, before we deal with this in the 2020 budget, can we have 3 years of detailed reports showing exactly what's been expended for the first 3 years?
Mr. May?
Through you, Madam Chair, there is on page 517 a chart which shows budget to actuals for all of the 3 years of the program. I'm not sure which level of detail Councillor Gazzola would like us to go, but I think we can certainly talk offline and see exactly what it is you're looking for.
Well, I would like to see a normal summary of a project and what's been spent for labor, what's been spent for capital projects, to give us some idea of what the costs of the program are. This is a program, and it has all the components of any other program. Can you give me any idea of how much we have spent on projects in the first 3 years? I mean, I added up the list that was provided to us. Is that all the capital expenditures to date for the first 3 years?
Yes, that's correct, for the projects that were approved.
So it's adding up to almost $400,000, correct?
Yeah, that list is interesting because it includes some other types of projects that we wanted to mention. I do have the actual in terms of how much was spent specifically on the grants, the Love My Hood related grants.
I'm interested in the actual Love My Hood program. What capital expenditures have we incurred? When I looked at this question of inequity, I'm going by these details here, and I'm concerned about that also. But I'd like to see that as part of. I mean, we're making a decision here. It's a fairly substantial expenditure. We need to know and have all of this information. Okay, I'll
Through you, Madam Chair, I draw Councillor Gazzola's attention to the bottom of page 517, which speaks to the 3 grant streams and how the funding has been provided, and also the paragraph on the top of page 518.
Yeah, I've tried to understand that, put it all together, but I'm challenged there somewhat. My final question is, what are you asking Council to approve today?
Mr. May?
Through you, Madam Chair, we're not asking Council to make any final decisions today. We're asking you to refer the financial implications of making Love My Hood permanent to the budget process and to endorse the changes that are outlined in the report to the matching grant policy.
Okay, that's what I'm driving at. I mean, the one part of it, and quite frankly, when I read the recommendation, and I read it very quickly, and I said, well, I have to support that. I cannot refer it. But you're saying now that your one is to approve all of these suggested changes? Now, I mean, I'm going to ask the question, how can I approve these changes until I see what the program has been for 2 or 3 years, what the costs are involved, and what these changes will involve? So if it's a question of approve today to send it forward to final budget day, I can support it. Otherwise, I can't support it.
So through you, Madam Chair, it's a bit of a chicken and the egg. So I understand your dilemma, Councillor Gazzola. What I hear you saying is that you can support the first recommendation. The second recommendation is in the report because at the same time there are a number of policy changes highlighted on page 515 and 516 which we want to make to the matching grant. And we're worded that recommendation to say subject to the 2020 budget deliberations. What we didn't want to have happen is during the budget process, whether it's capital or operating, council be debating the policy points of the matching grant. So if you agree with the changes highlighted on 515 and 516, then you could support the second recommendation because it is also subject to the 2020 budget.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I want to pick up on the notion of the amendment before us. Mr. May, if I heard you say correctly, you're worried about perhaps a bad project going in due to division versus a good project somewhere else if we approve this. But I just want to make sure that you're understanding the exact point is to make sure that the spread of the funding is equitable. So if I'm saying I would rather have a project that's maybe not as amazing in a ward that's getting nothing versus a project that is amazing in a ward that's already got everything, that's the point of this. So sorry, that's my question. The question is, I'm interested in seeing a transparent process as well that we can all point to. What I'm getting at is I'm not necessarily sure. The ward division might be one method. Are there other methods staff can look at to put before us and say this is our promise that it will be spent equitably or it will accrue otherwise?
So through you, Madam Chair, I think that it would be better to be looking at a neighborhood basis than a ward basis. To be honest, ward boundaries are political boundaries which have not been, or Love My Hood was not built on political boundaries. Having said that, what I'm worried about is that if we set a limit to say, if you do the wards, every ward gets $20,000 a year, what happens when that $20,000 is spent and another good project comes in? Or the even worse situation is, what happens when $0 have been spent, but a subpar application comes in and we feel pressure to spend that money to be able to say, look, we're being equitable?
Okay. In lieu of that, I think I would ask Councillor Anitis I want to see, to be frank, I know that it isn't set on political boundaries, but with respect, it's our job as the representative of those boundaries to make sure it's at least somewhat equitable. And to date, the numbers are stark. Like there are some have and have not areas. So I would support if we took away each ward. I think that gives staff some flexibility to come back with different options, whether it's neighborhood-based or even better area-based. I think that would help. So I would support that. The only other thing I was curious on, Mr. May, in terms of Councillor Singh's letting it accrue, I don't see any particular issue with that. So if the money if we do allocate it somehow, let's say it's ward-based or some other methodology, would it create incentive if that pot grew in a certain area?
Sorry, I didn't hear the...
Sorry, would it create incentive over time if the pot grew in a certain area that this neighborhood hasn't taken advantage of any Love My Hood dollars? Is there any barriers to that, or do you think it would create incentive?
So I think the problem would be, what we know is that the bigger projects need larger volunteer capacity. And so if we have a neighborhood that can't move forward a $4,000 project, I suspect they're not going to have the volunteer capacity to move forward a $20,000 or $30,000 project.
Okay, I'll have comment, Madam Chair.
I don't think there's anything to clarify at this point. That's all the first round questions. Can I just see a hands of who has second round questions? Because I've got a lot of people in the queue still. So there's 3 that have second round questions. Okay. I just want to understand and go back to the beginning, and I'm sure it's in your report, so don't refer me to the report. Just answer the question. What is the purpose of the Love My Hood strategy?
Through the chair, as I mentioned in the presentation, it's that vision, right, of resident-led, city-supported. So the idea is coming from people who live in neighborhoods. They know their neighborhood best. Let's support them, work with them to have their ideas become a reality. And then we have sort of 3 pillars of the Love My Hood vision, which is great places, connected people, working together. So I think there's a sense of collaboration involved. There's a sense of creating a sense of belonging. And there's also, earlier we just heard about the urban design manual and complete streets, that sense of place aspect of it as well.
Is it counterproductive to that to then start pressuring communities to come up with grant ideas to fulfill a quota that we have?
Through the chair, I think it could be a real concern. I think part of the success behind a lot of these initiatives is that it came from residents. We didn't stand in there and say they had to do it a certain way. We might have helped tweak some ideas to make it happen, but I think it would change the whole vision, I would think, because now there's sort of a whole other pressure to now come up with ideas, when oftentimes in volunteerism you see trends and waves, right? People might move, people are busy, they might be busy one year, not busy another year. And so we try to build in that flexibility into this program, like depending where neighborhoods might be at, then we can respond in that way. But if a neighborhood's not ready or able to take on something, I think that really creates a lot of pressure on that resident group for sure.
I had another question, but hold on, someone else wants to answer while I think of my question. Mr. Hildebrand.
Through the chair, one of the things that we're recommending with the neighborhood liaisons is the strategic approach. One of the things that they are doing already is building the capacity within neighborhoods. So to answer your question, if we take a strategic approach with our neighborhood liaisons and we give them we have the resources to start building that capacity in those communities that aren't applying. We're taking it from that point of view, so it's more of a capacity building exercise and bringing communities to a state where they're prepared to participate and be part of the Love My Hood. So that's the reason we were looking at the strategic approach to this. It's a lot of work to do that capacity building, but we have done it in the past. We've piloted it in some of the some of the neighborhoods that are not participating so much in Love My Hood, and we found success when we're able to put that extra effort into building that capacity in the neighborhood. Then they feel more confident participating, and they come forward, and we start building that capacity.
Do you feel, I know that you're bringing forward the neighborhood liaisons to be full-time. Looking at some of this in the data that we have, are there some that are overworked because of the amount of projects coming in? And will there be, so you have some liaisons that have, 20 projects and some that might only have 4. They're going to have a lot more time to do outreach if there's only 4. Might that shift or swing some of the results that we have here?
Am I on?
Yep, you are now.
We have found that in some areas, some neighborhood liaisons have been more busy than others. So what we've done is we've actually just moved projects around to different neighborhood liaisons. So there are some neighborhood liaisons that are operating in similar areas. So we've tried to adjust that way. I think that if we're able to increase the number of hours of neighborhood liaisons, then we will be able to do more of that work, and we can also be strategic in the work that we do in identifying the areas that really need some work and getting neighborhood liaisons into those areas.
One of my questions is with regards to the word matching. Obviously, there has to be some sort of matching component to it. It doesn't necessarily have to be straight dollars for dollars, but volunteer hours. How are we communicating that message out into the community so that they understand if I have an $8 million project, I can get $8,000 project. Send them to the budget, I get it. But if they have an $8,000 project and they have zero capacity or ability to raise $4,000 of that, how are we communicating that you don't have to come up with $4,000, that you can get in kind, you can use hours, that kind of stuff?
Through the chair, I think we've, as I mentioned, that single point of contact approach, their role is really to talk with the residents early on and let them know about the different criteria, because it's a few-page document, right? So they're helping us navigate and let people know about, hey, you can match with volunteer hours, like that's not a problem. We've actually started to ask a question on the grant application forms around, have you worked with anyone before you have applied? And we found that those applications are really informed and there's good, put together well, and they've really given thought to the matching and other grant criteria components. So we definitely try to, inform resident groups early on before they would even apply. But if they did just apply on the website, it's on there too.
Okay, and one last question. The ability for a larger project, like there's obviously a max amount that the matching grant can cover. Have we had any project that has gone beyond the matching, so they've put in maybe 70% and ours was only 30%?
Through the chair, yes, definitely. We're noticing that trend. If you look at all the projects, the asks are getting bigger, they're more capital focused, but there are a few examples actually of projects that have far surpassed what we've been able to give them. One example is the outdoor gym in Victoria Park. The value of an outdoor gym could be anywhere between $60,000 to $100,000, depending on the kind of features you have. So we provided a $20,000 grant, and then the resident groups, looked for sponsors, looked for other ways to pool the funding to then be able to fund the project.
Okay, thank you. So second round questions, Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And I really like the direction of questions that you asked about the consideration or requirement of participation from those that are bringing forward ideas. Because sometimes just a good idea is a good idea. Capital improvement might be one. We need this here. Right. That may not require a lot of volunteer hours per se to articulate exactly what's required, other than just pinpointing a need. So as we're just blending this into one grant, will that flexibility exist?
Through the chair, definitely. I think that one thing we've talked a lot about is, it may not take tons and tons of hours to make something happen. So I see your point about that match, but what we've been focusing on is ongoing activation. So even if like after a project's installed, there's not much else to do, we didn't really meet our match in terms of the time it spent to get the thing in the ground. Time could go towards ongoing activation, meeting up once a month with neighbors to have a gathering. Like that should count because it's going towards building that neighborhood community vibe.
How will you communicate that out? Is the booklet, the pamphlets, the material that we have, will it be very concise and very clear early on, saying, look, you know what, it's not that you have to do a significant amount, or the expectation is high?
Yeah, for sure. Through the chair, definitely. We have materials, brochures. I can share some of that stuff with you. But I do think the greatest asset we have is that face-to-face, because sometimes, you know, the documents and everything, they're easy to read, but you still might miss a thing or two. So having staff point it out to say, hey, like, just letting you know this happens and be aware of this. And like I said, the applications that have that staff support are really knowledgeable about all the different aspects of the program.
I absolutely agree. The face-to-face is important because it starts a conversation. But that goes into the point about the inequity that exists through the funding that's happened so far.
Right.
And let me just quickly say, and I think it's shared amongst all of us, even though there's alternatives but being proposed on here, in no way is it indicative or reflective on a bad idea or aspect of staff haven't done a good job. I think you have done the exact intended goal, and we're just trying to figure out a way that's fair and balanced amongst all community groups. That's all. So that being said, I think a big portion of having face-to-face conversations is bringing that interest out.
Right.
And I've read through the report, perhaps not as thorough details as I should, so it could be missing something there. And you've already said yourself that now bringing the liaison officers permanent as well as full-time as opposed to part-time, there will be more resource available to go out there and reach out interest. That being said, is a firm strategy in mind that could, or you could point to, that could speak to that concern about inequity, where we can, you can tell us, no, these are the steps we will definitely take in areas that have not had much of an uptake in the grant application. That being said, one. And the other is, I think it was an important point brought forward by Councillor Schneider, is this, and I think Councillor Johnston mentioned it too, that ward councillor participation can be a huge key aspect of this. Early on, I think some of us had brought this forward, and there was a resistance saying, no, we don't want to deter anyone away when there's a ward councillor involvement or influence, because that may push people away. But I think knowing the results now, 2 years, has that consideration been shifted a little bit? Can we use that resource of the ward councillor, knowing their community, having everyday conversations with their residents?
Mr. May?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. I do want to say that I think we actually all agree on the end outcome here. It's just a question of how we get there. There are a lot of things in this report that I think will get us to the place that Council's describing. Perhaps between now and Council, we'll put it in a succinct email to explain to you what it is the process is. The only thing I would say is what we know is we're going to need a very targeted outreach strategy. We've not done that work because until we get approval from Council to put the money in the budget and increase the staff hours, I think it's a waste of staff time to do that. But having said that, there are a number of changes that we can summarize, and we'll send you in an email before Council.
So, and you tell me if this is necessary, because I was not knowing how this is going to go. I think this is good suggestion brought forward. I will be supportive of it by Councillor Ioannidis. The other consideration I was showing is so that we get the surety that there will be continuation of this dialogue about the inequity, is giving a firm direction to staff, something along the lines of staff be directed to report on strategy to promote neighborhood matching grant in areas that have had limited uptake. Proposed strategy to include ward council participation, and this to be done within existing funding. Having staff having this clear direction, does this derail the work that you're going to do already, or would this give you a concise direction and us confidence that this will speak to our concerns?
So through you, Madam Chair, I wouldn't use the word derail, but it will delay us actually getting to the work. If we've got to put that on paper, bring it to Council for a committee cycle, then get through a Council cycle, it's just going to take longer and a lot more staff time. What we in recent weeks have been talking about is the same issues around ward councillor involvement. Some of you this week would have already seen some emails where your groups in your wards had been awarded matching grants. We should have been doing that for the past 3 years. So we know that we can do better in those areas. I don't think we need direct direction on that, because what it will mean is we'll spend time on a report bringing it here as opposed to actually doing the work.
Okay, well, I'd like to see how this goes. I'll have a comment about this. I may still bring my suggestion forward.
Okay, and this always happens probably after Councillor Singh, but I remind everyone we're at 3:40. We still have almost everybody in the queue, and so I just ask that you keep in mind as you make questions and comments. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to remind Council that there are other ways that community members can get funding through community services. So we've got the Tier 1 grant, the Tier 2 grant, the participatory budgeting. So this is just one other component. And I would say to start messing with the sort of idea of resident-led, not city-led, that's really, in my mind, what makes Love My Hood unique. Whereas, and the others I would say are resident-led too. But I think what Love My Hood allows for is those smaller projects that aren't necessarily neighborhood-led, neighborhood association-led. It gives them an opportunity to engage in projects. I don't know why some wards have more than others. Maybe we need a lesson on what Love My Hood can actually do so that we can go out and make that connection with our residents as city councillors. I'm not sure. But I think the information is there. But, you know, it could be the geography of the different wards where, you know, people's lives get in the way and they just can't pull projects together. But I think what's so important about this Love My Hood is that it not be staff-led. So I can't support this amendment because I fear that that's what that would lead to. So I don't know if you want to give a 2-second overview of Tier 1, Tier 2, and participatory budgeting as other sources of funding that not neighborhood associations, that people and or neighborhood associations can apply for. And I know that's a big question, but
I would suggest that that's probably, if that's information you want, you'd have to ask for that. I don't think that it's necessarily within the realm of what we're dealing with here. I understand the bigger picture that you're coming at it from, and I think the reminder is a good reminder for everybody, but I don't think anybody needs to hear again about what those are for. But I think you brought forward a really good point. Okay. A really good point that we need to remember there's all those pieces that fit into this whole entire puzzle. Up next is Councillor Marsh. Sure. Are we on questions still? Or we were on questions. Okay. Yeah. So, does that look at the motion? Yeah. We're working on it. Yeah. Councillor Marsh has indicated she still has questions. She's the last one that's indicated that she still has questions. Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you. So just a little bit further to what Councillor Chapman was saying, if councillors want support in promoting the Love My Hood grant going forward, can you support that type of engagement?
Through the chair, yeah, we're certainly happy to do that.
And even would you explore sending volunteers out, perhaps bringing back that beautiful lemonade stand that you had? I don't know if that still exists, but you know, to have a couple pop-up lemonade stands next year, specifically in the neighborhoods that have yet to really engage.
Through the chair, we have a ton of great resources, like I mentioned before, brochures, swag, lemonade stands. So anything you need that you're looking to have in an event, or if you want some presents, please let us know. We're happy to collaborate and share those materials with you.
And then when we look at the map of these 90 projects, I'm curious to know if there are specific neighborhoods that might really just already love their hood so much, but they don't need city support or haven't even thought to ask because they have the resources. Like I'm thinking very affluent neighborhoods might not engage because they can do it themselves. I'm curious about that, and I absolutely believe in equity, but I don't think that, anyway, I'll save it for my comments.
So there was a question there. Okay, perfect. Okay, moving on, we are going to move to comments. I ask everyone not to use your 5 minutes because we'll be here for a long time, but I know everybody wants to make a comment, so that time will be afforded to you. So we'll start, Mayor Verbanovic, did you want to go first or last? First?
Move the motion?
Yeah.
So, Madam Chair, I will move the motion, and I'll speak to it. And I want to begin again by emphasizing the great work that's been done by staff, but more importantly, the community as a whole in terms of driving the Love My Hood initiative forward. And I think that's an important thing that all of us need to reflect on, remember. This is about an initiative where residents take the lead and the city supports them along the way. That is the mission that we approved as a council in terms of moving this forward. And as Mr. May indicated, this is not about political boundaries. This is about neighborhood boundaries. We've had 6 wards at one time. We've had 10 wards at one time. Ward boundaries have changed all over the place over the years. And so where these individual initiatives end up, could be in any one political boundary. This was all about recognizing neighborhoods and the strength of neighborhoods, and that's what it's been built upon. And it's for that reason that while I'm a big supporter of trying to ensure that we're being equitable across the community, I don't believe that this motion, where we would simply start dividing everything up into 10 equal pieces every year, is not going to create that. Tell me one other program where we have done that in the city of Kitchener, other than the capital, one-time capital that we recently allocated some dollars for parks in each ward. We don't do that. Do we say, well, you know what, if your percentage of money for leisure access in your ward is used up just because you happen to have a ward that has lower income people, and another ward isn't being used, well, too bad, your people are out of luck. It doesn't make sense. I think we need to focus and keep remembering what the initiative was about when we started this whole Love My Hood initiative. I do believe there are opportunities, and staff have outlined some of them, and I think we need to push them on those in terms of things like making sure that there is more engagement in different areas of the city, particularly those that haven't utilized it. I think there is a question, and Councillor March touched on it, in all due respect, when we look at the 2 wards that have been compared here, I mean, in one of them, part of that money, $20,000, went to a fitness facility in a park that is a citywide park. It's not Victoria Park is not a neighborhood park. It's one that benefits the entire city. Similarly, in all due respect, we have a very successful neighborhood association that invests capital dollars themselves in parts of the ward as part of their give back in one of the other areas. Is that why they haven't applied for money? I haven't asked them that question, but maybe that's an explanation for why we haven't seen a lot of uptake from that particular ward. So I think we need to factor some of these things in before we start talking this, everything needs to be equal scenario, because I think it'll take us away from what the whole initiative is about. And so I would urge council not to support this notion of creating some sort of equal allocation that is going to be forward. I think we need to push forward on the initiatives around making sure that we take the staff members to work with neighborhoods where maybe more support is needed and so on, and get them engaged, get them involved. I think the other thing that we can't lose sight of, and I think Councillor Chapman was trying to get at this, is there are other funding things out there that are inequitable as well. For example, with our neighborhood association programming, there is a certain amount of funding that comes per program offered. Well, I would argue some of the very successful neighborhood associations are getting an equitable chunk of that money from the city compared to others. I don't hear people arguing that point today around the Horseshoe. Well, you're one of the ones getting that money, Councillor Ioannidis.
Councillor Ioannidis, it's Mayor Verbanovich.
So anyway, my point is, I would urge council to support this recommendation. It has been a very successful program, and I would urge us not to support the amendment that's before us.
Okay, up next is Councillor Michaud.
Well, thank you, Councillor Galloway-Silac. This has been a pretty interesting conversation, and I'm just going to just remind everyone that this initiative underscores the importance of continued support to expand so that more neighborhood communities can become involved and engaged and experienced in the sense of belonging that happens when citizens work together. I see that there is an inequitable on the chart here. I don't think that when staff presented this Love My Hood in 2017, did they even imagine A, it would be so successful, and B, there would show some inequities as we see on the paper, on the pages here. But I'm not convinced that inequity is because of what the numbers are showing. I think that what Councillor Ioannidis has put forth, he makes a valid point. However, I won't support it, but I would like to make an amendment, and this kind of speaks to it. Because of hiring more staff, you'll need more dollars, and there will be a bit of an outreach to the areas that maybe aren't as engaged as they could be, and maybe they could, build on that. So I am amending it that as part of the 2020 budget process to increase the amount of funding for the matching grant from $150,000 to $200,000 per year to fund the Love My Hood neighborhood matching grant. Thank you.
Sorry, just for clarification, is that intended because you mentioned something about staffing, or is it just for more projects?
Projects is part of the whole Love My Hood matching grant process.
Okay, so more for the grants.
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just considering the amendment there. Okay. I want to start by saying Love My Hood's an absolute success. It was the first time that we've tried something like this, and I think, by and large, I think it blew everyone away in terms of what it was able to achieve. I want to be clear on that. Some of this conversation is negative, but that's because we're trying to work out some of the kinks in a fantastic program. We could spend all day talking about how great it is. But one of those kinks is the inequity, and it does concern me. There's a ward that probably doesn't think Love My Hood's doing all that well because they got, there's another ward that got 15 times the amount of funding they got. They probably aren't even entirely aware Love My Hood exists because those neighborhoods need to be brought forward as well. I'm going to vote in favor of the amendment that's before us, not because I want to see that be the final distribution of funds. I think there can be tweaks in there where we can add in percentages, and 1 year it can be something more in one ward, or maybe it's over a 5-year period or something like that. So we're not losing those opportunities that are big in one area. But I cannot, my role we have a ward boundary system, and my job literally is to make sure that we put these processes in place, and that's the high level of governance. Right now, if we approve this, there is nothing to say that in 5 years' time we're not going to get the exact same results. We might see that certain wards get a whole bunch of money and other wards are completely, I'm not going to say neglected because that would indicate that it's staff's fault when it's not. So I'm going to support this now. Perhaps there'll be tweaks between now and council, but I think from a governance standpoint, I can't support something that isn't helping all portions of the city even closely. If we're talking, twice as much money in one ward, that's one thing. But when it's 15 times as much money, we got to look at tweaking the process. And the fact of the matter is too, that there's people that are engaged and there are people that are not engaged. And I think it's fantastic. Melissa Bowman in the audience is connected to her local community. She's connected to council. She's out there fighting for areas and support. And that's amazing. But there are also people that vote once every 4 years for someone they want to do that work for them and look after them. They don't want to be engaged. That's their right. They want to make sure there's a park there, but they don't want to be part of the process. That's how it works. So, like I said, I'm going to support the First Amendment. Because I think we need to have something in there to make sure it's equitable. The second one, I guess I have to ask the clerk. I'm happy to consider this during the budget process, but if I vote against it now, I guess I just want to see it. I want to see this in context of the full budget. So if I vote against it now, can it still be brought up as an issue paper as part of the budget process? It can. Okay. So just to be clear, I'm voting against it not because I don't necessarily want to do it, but because I just want to see the full budget when we do consider this additional $50,000. Okay.
Councillor Johnston.
Yes, thank you. I will actually be supporting both of these amendments, and I would agree with Councillor Davey. And listen, as you know, I think this is an amazing program. But unless we put something in here that talks about equity, then I think that can easily be eroded, and that we are going to get different applications from different parts of the city, and I don't think that means that some are going to be worse than others, and I don't want us to ever support something that doesn't fit the rules or the intent of Love My Hood. What I want to see us do with this is to bring up all neighborhoods, and I think that unless we put some teeth into it, that is really going to be my concern, that's not going to happen. And I do pledge as a ward councillor that I will help you do that in my ward. I have been doing that. I've been bringing people to you. I've been encouraging people to meet with you. I just want to see that move from maybe that initial meeting where people perhaps meet with you and then get a little intimidated and maybe don't move forward. Let's keep moving everybody forward so that it can be more of an equitable thing across the city. Thank you.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Galloway-Seelock. Again, I want to reiterate what I've heard from a lot of my colleagues. There is no doubt in my mind that you guys have done a phenomenal job. Excellent work. I'm very proud of what you guys do. And that has never been a question in my mind on the work that you've done. What I was concerned with when we went through this process back in 2017 was the fair, equitable process. And when I see the numbers, it startles me. It really startles me that one ward has $6,000. Like, that's where it starts to. I was assured back then that this would not happen, and today I'm seeing it here. So that's the reason why I brought this forward. I'm not about saying each ward needs $20,000 to the T. I'm not all about that. I just want to see something in there that shows that there is some form of an equitable process. It may be whether or not it accrues or may not. I leave it to you guys. You guys are the experts. I'm not here to dictate what I think is the best way. That's why I directed to bring forward a transparent, it's broad. To come something forward with something that I think will be, I'm not telling you what to do. All I'm just saying is I want to see it better outlined. And as far as the neighborhood associations, I've never been one to say my neighborhood association makes more money than others. I've always talked about being fair and equitable among the neighborhood associations. In fact, I'm probably one of the more vocal ones saying we should bring a salary cap towards those, like the NFL, like a football thing. So I've never been wanting to say that pen one neighborhood against another or one association against another. Never been that way. So with that, I mean, I don't care if it means to change the word
neighborhood, whatever it means. I just want to have something there that's in place, because when we come back here in 4 years and if I see this again, I want to know that means I failed my job. And I don't want to fail my job. I want us to all succeed. So that's why I want this here.
Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to carry my comments from just the last words that Councillor Ioannidis has said, that he wants us to succeed. I share in that sentiment, and I'd like to see all neighborhoods to succeed. I am conscious on the comments that made by Mayor Bebenovic, or pointing out that we do have other granting and funding models that may not be equitable. But this was one way of doing something different that's resident-led and staff-supported, that was supposed to have brought and uplifted the entire city, all residents and all neighborhoods across the city. This is not a reflection on a bad strategy. It's a great model, and I think we are deserving of all the awards that we've won. Now it's on us knowing our community better and seeing what the results have been and saying, you know what, this needs to be tweaked. We got a great idea. How do we ensure that that great idea gets replicated not only in areas where neighborhoods are organized now and other areas may be organized then, but the problem is there's a disparity and an equity that gets built up over the next number of years that will be hard to catch up. And we want to ensure that doesn't happen. And then from the very beginning on the onset, now that we learned the results and how the sharing and how the interest exists within our community, how can we ensure that investment gets made across the board? That's really what it's all about, especially for this one, ensuring that that resource is available across the board. And just because, and I think I've said this before, and others have said it too, just because a neighborhood may not be ready now, it may be down the road, and their need and desire may be incumbent on a higher funding requirement. Well, this perhaps more fair allocation across the city may achieve and bring forward interest, because again, the limitation of the dollars it speaks to now may not spur the interest. By having that pot grow will bring those ideas forward. It's about having what we've done and making it better, and I think that's what the amendment by Councillor Ioannidis does. So I am supportive of the amendment. I'm supportive of Councillor Michaud's amendment as well. I think this is a great, and I think by supporting that second amendment, we are giving that confidence and support to staff as well as to our community that this was a great program, and we actually want to see it increase in dollars, because we do need more of these great ideas coming across the city about resident-led and staff-supported initiatives. So I'll be supporting both the motions. And Chair Galloway-Sealock, if the first amendment fails, I do want to bring forward the motion that ensures that staff are, in fact, directed to report back a strategy of how areas across the city that haven't had a good uptake, how that strategy will be done, and how the word council participation will be included in that as well. So I will just pass that to the clerk if this amendment fails only. Because I think if it succeeds, it will speak to most of the concerns laid out by many of us around the horseshoe. Thank you.
Mr. Ray?
I'm sorry to ring in. Councillor Singh, would you be, what I'd suggest is give us a week to send an email to you that outlines exactly what you've said. If you're not satisfied with that response, you could move the same motion at council. But this motion requires us to do a whole lot of legwork to prepare a report, and I think we don't need to do that amount of work to satisfy your request.
Yes, I appreciate that. If you think you already have some great ideas churning away and you think that email will specify my concern, I have no issue with that. The intent goal is to ensure that we have a basis of how we move forward to ensure that inequity is dissipated.
Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Galloway-Sealock. I understand the desire to have equity throughout the city. But I look at page 516 in the report, and right at the top of the page, it says, strengthen the evaluation criteria to encourage a more equitable distribution of the grant funds, prioritizing neighborhoods that have not traditionally been active and new and emerging neighborhood groups. So I think we're covered off there. I think we have to keep in mind, too, this is a brand new program that's never been done before. So the uptake on it has not been spread around the city at the start. But I believe that it will and it can be. I think as councillors, we're responsible for getting the word out about this program. It's an awesome program. I know just after being elected, Councillor Marsh and I met with Mr. May, and we're very excited about this program. But are we spreading the word about it? Are we out there engaging with our groups? Are we at our community association meetings, you know, expelling the benefits of this program and encouraging applications? I think we have a lot to do with this. I believe that in the coming years that we will see projects coming in from all over the city. The one thing I fear, I mean, there could be a project in a ward that is large, worthy, and beneficial that needs a lot of funding for that year. But if we keep things strictly equitable, that won't be able to happen. But perhaps that ward could have it that year, and in the next 2 coming years, maybe not as much. I want neighborhoods in my ward, but also across the city, to be strong, to be connected, to be safe, to be full of civic pride. So I can't support the equity amendment. I will support the extra funding, but I think that can also play into things as well. So it's a great report. It's a great program. And I do believe that things will balance out. I think there have been lessons learned, as staff have said. So I see this happening, the equity improving as the years and months go by.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. I think that it's important to remember that we were reminded when we talked about the Urban Design Manual that Kitchener has a lot of eclectic built form, but we also have a lot of eclectic neighborhoods, a lot of various types of neighborhoods, some that are very tight-knit and close, some that have very spread out layouts, and we have a place for all types of neighborhoods in the city. I disagree respectfully that if in 4 years we see a similar layout that we will have failed if we don't do an equitable allotment. I think that we will have failed if we don't know why. I think that if we learn that in some areas of the city they already are, as I said before, loving their hood with their own resources and don't need city engagement, all the power to them. If it's because the ward councillor or staff or volunteers haven't let them know that the grant doesn't exist, then yeah, we have failed. We are, as a downtown councillor, I'm keenly aware that downtown residents are pretty darn engaged. I get a higher volume of calls and emails and grabbing me in the street and the grocery store, etc., I think, than the average councillor. And I think that the results of this initial 3 years of the Love My Hood strategy speak to that. That downtowners said, hey, what? You've got a grant? Okay, I'll apply, I'll get my neighbors together, we're going to make this happen. And whereas others may have been more reluctant, although I would be very surprised if it's because they were intimidated by the likes of Josh or Sarah Anderson or any of the staff. I think it's more to do with a need for us to make sure people are aware that it's available and perhaps also the need. I think that we need to, in another discussion soon, direct staff to bring forward a transparent and equitable strategy for the funds that come in through the neighborhood associations. That's a problem that we need to take a hard look at. This is not that problem. This is a good problem to have. I do agree that we need to have a little bit more funds, although I think it should be an option put forward in the issue paper, because I also think that we need funds in tier 2 funding, for example. That is going to be something that we'll need to grapple with during budget time. If I don't know what staff's thoughts are on 200,000 capital monies allotted versus 150, I'd like to hear from them between now and council. I'm happy to support it now, but I also think that it should just be something that we may need to tweak at budget time.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, thank you. There are a lot of words here today. This is a new program that we will have in place at the end of this year for 3 years. We're being asked to carry on the program and even to expand it by making numerous changes. I don't have a problem with that. From what I can see, there have been some good come out of this program. But yet I would like to see exactly what this program has cost us for the 3 years. I'd like to be able to look at that and looking forward, what will the future cost? We have to know these things before we wholeheartedly adopt a new program. We normally do that. We're hearing a word more and more every day called recession. Where do we go down the road if we do run into some harder times? We need to know what the costs are that are involved. And so when it comes to voting, I will support, yes, moving this along to the budget process. At this point, I can't support any of the changes. I don't know what the impact of those changes are. How can you support something when you don't know what the impact is? Now, this whole question of equity. We are a political body here, and equity rings out every day. Let's be honest about it. Everything we do in politics, we have an equal number of female cabinet ministers and male cabinet, everything we do. And fair enough, there's nothing wrong, because we try to be equitable. We can't get totally parochial and worry about our own, but you do, over a period of time, governments do tend to try to be equitable in the way they distribute grants, the way they deal with money. So I believe it's possible to be equitable with a few tweaks and rules and regulations. A good example really is the gym outfit in Victoria Park. Really, that is something that benefits the whole community, and maybe it shouldn't even be in those figures, and it really skews the figures. So it's a matter of really looking at what we're doing, knowing what we're doing, and coming up with some good comparative figures, and bringing in a few rules. I don't see a problem with a program that says at the end of the year you haven't spent all your funds. Maybe a neighborhood or maybe a group have bigger ideas that would take 2 years funding. Why should that get ruled out? So I think there are ways of looking at that. We have to be, at the end of that proverbial day, equity is important, and we can do it. I'm confident that staff can do it and council can support it.
Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I'll try to be short. I guess because I already made comments, but I do feel quite confident in what staff is proposing to ensure greater outreach, because I think that can make a big change. And I think as councillors, we have the same responsibility to do that outreach. We can't blame those neighbourhoods, well, it sounds bad coming from me, but we can't blame the neighbourhoods that have managed to tap into these funds because the others haven't, if we don't, do some of our own outreach with our residents and inform them of the opportunities that are there. I just wanted to say one thing about the use of the word neighbourhood, because I think if we start trying to distribute equitable funds to all neighbourhoods, well, in my ward, I probably have 100 neighbourhoods and maybe more, and I'm sure every ward has the same. because a neighborhood is not a neighborhood association boundary. It could be a street with 10 houses. That's a neighborhood. So I wouldn't want to go down that road, and I think that was removed from the table. But the other thing I wanted to say when we talk about equitable, everybody has equal opportunity to apply for these monies. Nobody is excluded. If not every neighborhood or every group of people out there has applied, then that's what we failed in, is informing them of what is available to them. But it's not about the distribution of money. It's about the ability to apply, and I don't think anybody has been unable to do that because of the ward or wherever they might happen to live. So I've already said what I'm going to do. So anyway, thank you.
We're not going around the horseshoe again. Okay, so what are you? Okay. Okay, I'll turn your mic on for that.
I'm going to withdraw my recommendation. I think I got my point across, and I think staff will strive to provide that equity and I think the point is I think I got my point across, and that's what I wanted, because I didn't feel like I got my point across the very first time to kick at the can, and this time I'm hoping that I think I can go along with maybe what Councillor Singh has put forward. I think, and Mr. May said he's going to strive to put that forward, so I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay, so two amendments have been withdrawn. The one that's still there is the one with regards to the funding. I'm not going around the horseshoe again. Councillor Davey.
Sorry, I apologize. I have to do my job. I will retable Councillor Ioannidis' amendment.
Okay, that amendment's back on the table. Okay, I still get to make my comments. That's where we're at. Okay, I first want to bring us back to the focus of the positivity of this program. It's somewhat been lost within the talk today, and I understand that was nobody's intent, but it feels as though this isn't a good news story, and it really honestly is. And so I want to thank staff for all their hard work. It's been a fantastic program and done a lot of fantastic things. And I think we have to let the new recommendations take shape. We have to let the full-time staff do their job and reach out to communities that maybe are neighborhoods that aren't as engaged as others. I come from a ward that has the lowest voter turnout. I represent that ward. I have that title. But somehow, we were still able to put in 9 projects and get $39,000. The one that got $6,000 only had 8 projects. It's a matter, so it's also the number of projects each one has done and the amount of money they've asked for. So it's not that Ward 5, I'm just using mine as an example because it's better if I use my own, that we did 9 projects at $40,000 and they did 8 at $6,000. Or Ward 6 that did 10 at $24,500, and these are rough numbers. Or Ward 2 that did 5, only did 5, and they had $14,500-ish. And so I think it's not reflective of the money or the system or the program. It's just a matter of who's engaged, who's not engaged. Is it time now to do this? Is it not time to do this? I think staff have done a really good job at tweaking the process. I think they've done a really good job at saying our part-time staff are over capacity, they need to be full-time. We need to consolidate the grants. We need to be proactive in neighborhoods. And that we don't need to be restrictive to ward boundaries, that we don't need to define neighborhoods. You see some of these grants that are cross-border. Heck, Ward 5 is matching with Ward 10 on a grant. I don't understand the grant yet, but that's okay. We're matching it, we're doing a grant together, and we're like not quite opposite sides of the city. And so I think there's a way to do it all, and I think Councillor Ioannidis, your point has been made, but I come back to the fact that, and bring us back to the point that this is such a positive program and has done so much good in our community. And I thank everyone from the community members to the staff members to the council members to everyone who's been engaged in it, because it really is innovative. We see other communities coming to us, and so we can't lose that enormous thank you and sense of of congratulations, of you've done a great job, and that we've learned, and we can move this forward and we can make it better. So that's all my comments. With that, it's been moved by Mayor Verbanovic. We're going to deal with the first amendment now is the amendment on the top with regards to the 2020 budget, the matching grant going from $150,000 to $200,000 per year. Okay, record a vote for everything. Those in favor? Those opposed? That's carried. The amendment number 2, I guess. That's okay. As it's been retabled and moved by Councillor Davey. Councillor Singh, you've queued in. Okay. Okay, the question's being called. Those in favor? Those in favor? Those opposed? That's defeated. Now we go back to the main motion as moved by Mayor Verbanovic. Yes, there is. Would you like them done separately? Okay. So we're dealing with the first paragraph in the recommendation on the staff report. That's carried unanimously. And the second paragraph of the staff report. Those in favor? Those opposed? That carries. And with that, I think we are all done community and infrastructure services for today. Mayor Verbanovic? Can you cue in?
I was pressing yes. Just want to remind everyone of the FCM board meeting this week and the 2 receptions Tuesday and Thursday, and hopefully council will make its way out to one and or both of them on the 2 days. Thanks.